now entering the Bass Galaxy.
This is Teal's Bass Galaxy. I'm your host. This podcast is about raw, real conversations with real awesome people about bass fishing, bass boats, and heck, there are no limits in the galaxy. Attention all Bastronauts. This podcast is supported by the Bass Galaxy's title sponsor, Waypoint Angler Supply, the Midwest's new landing pad for hardcore anglers just like you and me. If you're looking for the sneaky goods you can't find anywhere else, look no further. Waypoint Angler Supply has the largest offering of JDM tackle in the Midwest, and they are right here in Minnesota on Lake Minnetonka. This is truly a place every bass fisherman in Minnesota needs to visit because we finally have a tackle shop in the state that's as dreamy as the ones you find down south. And the staff at Waypoint Angler Supply understands the various needs of us anglers, which is why you'll find the selection there so enticing. Ross and the folks at Waypoint Angler Supply are passionate about carrying the right stuff, providing an authentic customer experience, and they listen to the anglers. And it doesn't end at JDM baits. They stock all the top U.S. brands, as well as local Minnesota brands like Veselka Fishing and Customs, Arsenal Fishing, Bait Lab Custom Swim Baits, All Terrain Tackle, Bagley Northland, Outcast Tackle, and more. So stop into their store on Lake Minnetonka or visit their website, waypointanglersupply.com. That's waypointanglersupply.com. Use the code GALAXY20 to save 20% on your next tackle binge. Really excited for today's guest. His story is unique and it's kind of untold, so I'm really excited to share it. He's a Bassmaster Elite Series pro. He's proven he belongs there. He's there to stay. He's qualified for another classic. He won a Bassmaster Open on Grand Lake. And yeah, that's right. I'm talking about Bob Downey, ladies and gentlemen. This guy lets his rod do the talking, but today we're going to hear his story in full. Listen up, kids. This is a good one. Hello, Bastronauts. This is a message of gratitude for myself, all your support that you've shown the Bass Galaxy and Teal's Bass Galaxy podcast, and just very grateful to all the guests and people who've tuned in so far. We want to keep this show rolling for all of you who keep tuning in. So it'd be great if you'd be willing to subscribe to our YouTube channel and support all the great sponsors that keep the Bass Galaxy rolling and ever expanding. And always open to feedback, but your support is greatly appreciated. So hit that subscribe button, check out our sponsors, and we look forward to bringing you even more intergalactic content. Thank you. Well, I got to be honest with you, Mr. Downey. I think what you've just done in general with your fishing career is super neat, dude. And I appreciate you coming out here and making the trip. And I've been excited for this one. So cheers,
man.
Buddy.
Yeah, cheers. I appreciate you having me out. It's cool to see the Bass Galaxy, and this place is sweet, man. This is, like you said, this is what bass dreams are made of. So.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, man. And you just qualified for another classic, and you're kind of a silent killer. And I mean that with the utmost respect, because you just let your rod do the talking. And I guess I really want to just get to know you, because I feel like I haven't talked to you a whole lot. But you mentioned you've always had that cabin up by Jim's. Kind of how'd you get started with bass fishing and tournaments? Because it was like, I'll be honest, you kind of came out of nowhere for me, and I thought it was amazing, and you've proven you belong where you're at, dude.
Yeah, no, I can understand that totally, and I hear that from a lot of people, and it doesn't bother me at all. It's just kind of my personality. I'm a quiet dude. I don't really it's not that I'm not friendly and I don't like to talk about bass fishing or anything like that, or I love talking about it. I could sit and talk about it for hours, but yeah, I kind of just do my own thing and keep to myself a little bit. So maybe that's why, or part of it. But yeah, from a tournament standpoint, I started tournament fishing, I think in 2004 in the Junior Bassmasters.
No kidding.
Yeah, Minnesota Bass Nation.
No shit.
Yeah, so I've tournament fished for almost 20 years. 35 right now.
Sure.
So I've tournament fished for a long time. I did a lot of Minnesota Bass Nation stuff growing up. And that's kind of how I cut my teeth, whether it was the Junior Bassmasters or Minnesota Bass Nation through like small clubs and then the state tournament each year, the state TOC.
Sure.
Was really how I started.
Was that the junior state TOC then?
Yeah, the first one I fished.
Sure.
It was in Bemidji, Minnesota on Turtle Lake. And I just kind of mentioned the story about it recently on social media, but we showed up at the lake, my dad and I. I'd never fished a tournament before. We didn't really know what we were doing. Showed up the day before the event, and we showed up at whatever noon or something like that, and we see kids out there buzzing around in bass boats, and we're like, well, what's going on? And we're like, oh, they must be like practicing or scoping out spots for the tournament. We didn't really know what that was. And so we're like, well, if we can be out there today, we may as well try and get out there. So we rented a little 12-foot tin boat from the local resort that we were staying at for that tournament. And we went, and I think it had like a 10 horse on the back, and I dumped a couple rods in the boat, and my dad putted us around the lake, and we scoped it out for 2-3 hours. And yeah, that was like my first practice experience for a tournament in the Junior Bassmasters. We didn't grow up with a bass boat. We had at my grandpa's cabin, we had 12-foot tin boats, and that's what I learned to fish out of, really. Right. And so anyways,
the old Canadian bass boat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Little 6-horse Johnson tiller, and that's what we fished out of growing up. And so yeah, that was my first tournament experience. The next day, tournament day, they were volunteer boaters, which was really cool. So I got to fish out of a bass boat, which was like, whoa, this is amazing. And ended up taking second in that tournament. I was throwing a spinnerbait in pencil reeds, which I feel like is what I grew up doing in northern Minnesota for bass. And now I don't know if last time I caught a bass on a spinnerbait in pencil reeds, which is really weird. I'm sure it probably still works at times.
That's how I got started. Pike for me.
Yeah. And that's what I did all day. Ended up second, and I was like totally hooked after that. And
you had your morning to afternoon transition, kind of your whole milk run planned out after that day of practice.
Yeah,
with Dad?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you find that in practice?
I found that, and then like a weed line Texas rig ribbon tail worm bite.
Heck yeah.
And so I did like the morning spinnerbait in the reeds for probably the first 4 or 5 hours, and then I plunked around on a weed edge in the afternoon and ended up taking second. And that's how it started for me. Tournament fishing anyways. I grew up fishing at a very young age. I grew up in a family that we fished, like my dad, my mom, my grandpa, my uncles on both sides, really, my mom's side and my dad's side. So I was exposed to the outdoors and fishing at an extremely young age, 2-3 years old sort of deal. And biked to ponds around the house, and in Egan we have a lot of ponds. And so I would ride my bike and fish those ponds a lot growing up. And then got a canoe and was able to, I think when I got my license, I'd take the canoe out to those ponds and fish that way too. But that was my first tournament experience. And yeah, it's really cool. I was hooked after that. And kind of just progressed from there, really. Fished the adult clubs after that. When I turned 18, you could start fishing adult Bassmaster, Bass Nation clubs, small club, 8 to 10 boat sort of deal.
Yep.
But didn't have a bass boat at the time, so still fished out of the back of people's boats. And then we eventually got a 16-foot tiller my dad and I made a live well and put it in there, and that's what I started fishing club tournaments out of.
Sure.
And that's how I got my start, and it's kind of progressed from there.
Dude, that's a cool start, and I guess I felt like I was listening to me in some of those instances because, I got started on a spinnerbait in the pencil reeds camping with my grandpa who would take me fishing, and I remember my dad, I had a little 14-foot boat, and we modified it together, and it's one of the coolest things he helped me do, and put a live well in it, and it's weird how that works. 'Cause my first tournament, I had to run the 14-foot boat, and I didn't know what the deal was.
Yeah.
So I show up the night before. This was the Fishers of Men Legacy Series, and the night before, I remember I was so jacked because I drew boat number 4, and this is my first ever bass tournament on the Horseshoe Chain, home lake. Grew up there, heard there was a tournament there. This was pre-junior Bassmasters, but when we got to the takeoff that morning, I realized that I had a 20 horse and a 14-footer, and the smallest horsepower I could find around me was a 150.
Yeah.
So takeoff started, and I don't think we got 100 yards before we went from boat number 4 to boat 30 or whatever the heck.
Right.
But humble beginnings. I like that, dude.
Yeah.
And grinding through that.
Yeah.
And the Junior Bassmasters was a cool deal back then.
Very
and
cool.
especially with the boat thing and being able to fish out of those bass boats. That's how I got introduced to it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how fast you think a 55-mile-an-hour bass boat is. And then now it feels like a slower one.
Yeah. Right.
Now you got a bass cat, Bob Downey.
Right. Right. Yeah. Now I'm in my dream boat at this day and age. But yeah, I grew up fishing out of those smaller boats, and it teaches you a lot, right? You're fishing without electronics. You're fishing with, at the time, what we thought was really awesome, equipment. But now it's it'd be hard to fish a big tournament out of a 16-foot tiller,
right,
with the trolling motor on the back of the boat. But that's what we did, and it really taught me a lot about fishing shallow cover and picking shallow stuff apart. And then eventually, when I got electronics, it opened up a whole new world, right? But I grew up in a time where electronics, 360 side imaging, forward facing was not a thing. And so I feel like those guys that are maybe 30 plus have had those experiences.
Sure.
And to me, it really helped me, I think, in terms of the long term of being able to pick shallow stuff apart. So I kind of take a little pride of growing up in that age, I guess.
Me too, man. Me too.
Where we didn't have electronics, and don't get me wrong, I use them all the time now, but I love turning them off too and getting up shallow and doing whatever, just picking things apart with your eyes.
Getting back to the roots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
So I guess you're a Bassmaster Elite Series pro now, Bob Downey. Is that something you dreamed of since that first tournament? And is that something that has this been a goal you've been striving for since then? Or was it something that kind of came about just later, I guess?
Yeah, I would say both to that question. The first part of it is yes, absolutely had a dream to do it, no doubt. When I saw Kevin Van Dam win the Classic in 2001 on the Delta, it happened to be on TV that day, and my dad turned it on, and we were watching the weigh-in, and I watched him win and jump, and he fist pumped in the air and just won the Classic. I was like, I want to do that. That's my dream now, right?
Yeah.
And so fished, the junior stuff and the adult club and the state TOC. Went to college at the University of Iowa and fished for their bass team there.
Oh, really?
And traveled in college for 4 years around the country.
Sure.
And fishing college tournaments. And really, I went there because I wanted to get a business degree, and they had a decent business school, and I wanted to kind of get out of the state, and I didn't want to go to school in Minnesota necessarily. And so that was a good fit. And they had a bass team, which was also a really cool deal, and something that I wanted to do in college. College fishing, I was in college from 2006 to 2010, and it was just kind of on the brink of breaking loose to where it is now.
Yep.
It was popular, but not as popular as it is today.
Right, even 2011 to 2015 when I was going, same deal. It was not the same.
Yeah, still in its infancy.
Well, now they have combines for that.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah, it's
This
crazy.
is the wildest shit I'd ever heard.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's blown up. It's way more popular now, but I went there because I wanted to get experience fishing around the country.
Yeah.
And it was a big eye opener for me. Like, you know, going in, I was like, yep, I'm going to do this because I have dreams of doing this for a living, and this is going to be a good experience.
Yeah. And
I feel like this is the experience I need outside of the state of Minnesota to like see what it's like, see what traveling's like. And I'm not going to lie, like the first couple tournaments, they broke me. Like, we had a 1987 Ranger I bought my sophomore year, and so many issues with that boat. Trailer, you know, just stuff that you, as a college angler, you got your eye on like the end goal and the end prize, and you're inexperienced traveling on the road at that time as a 18, 19, 20-year-old. And so we ran into a lot of those issues. And it's like, man, I don't know if this is for me. Like, this is way, there's a lot more to this than just catching bass.
For sure.
And so it taught me that. And once you get over that hump and you learn how to deal with those issues and prepare for it, then I started to grow more as a college tournament angler, and we had some success more in our senior year.
Sure.
And it kind of opened my eyes back up to, okay, maybe I do want to try and do this. And so I fished as a co-angler out of college in some Toyota Series events.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Bad experience. Like,
really,
as a co-angler, you if you've done it before, you know, you can, if you have a bad draw, or the guy just has a tough day, it's fishing, right? We all have tough days.
Right.
And I left a sour taste in my mouth. Was like, man, if I'm going to do this, I want to be able to do it as a boater and not a co-angler.
Feel like you have some control over your destiny. So
yeah, a little bit. And then soon after that, I got a decent job in Hudson, Wisconsin. That's why I ended up living in Hudson for 10 years. And that's kind of why I was there when I qualified for the elites. But started working, liked what I was doing.
Sure. Was
still fishing locally, still had the dream of doing it, but all of a sudden it kind of got put on the back burner. And like very much driven to like get better as an angler, but all of a sudden the dream of doing it for a living was like, man, I don't know if I can do this. Like I don't know if I have the drive to do it. I like what I'm doing for work right now.
What were you doing for work?
Sales in surety bonding. So it's performance and payment bonds for construction contracts.
You lost me.
So if there's like a public school being built,
sure,
there's got to be a performance bond on that job between the school district and the contractor.
So like a loan.
It's different than that. It's like an insurance product. So if the contract, there is such a thing as like a bond that funds projects for sure.
Yep.
But a performance bond guarantees the contractor is going to finish the job to spec. And if they don't, then the school can make a claim on our bond, similar to an insurance claim. So I know it's a niche deal. I didn't know anything about it before I got into it.
That's cool, though.
The reason,
you need those things.
The reason they're there is because tax dollars are being spent on those jobs.
For sure.
And so we underwrite the contractor to make sure they're financially sound and good people character-wise, and they're capable of doing the job before we would ever write that performance bond for them. Sure. If they weren't capable of doing it, we wouldn't write the bond, right?
That makes sense.
So it kind of fell in line with my finance degree that I got. There's a lot of financial analysis and underwriting involved, as well as a sales aspect to it. So anyways, that's what I was doing.
So you're a good numbers guy and salesperson. That's a good mix.
I like numbers. I like the financial side of things. I like learning about small businesses, which is what we were working with, smaller to medium-sized contractors, usually very salt-of-the-earth type people. And I like working with those type of people. Contractors are also, a lot of them hunt and fish too, and so I could relate to them really well. So I liked doing it. I really enjoyed it. And I did it. I still do it to a small extent,
Really?
much smaller than I used to.
Sure. Like independent or with them
Just
still?
all sales now,
Sure.
no management role. So it's just all sales based, which allows me the flexibility to do what I'm doing. But I'm handling a much smaller book of business now than I was when I qualified for the Elite Series.
Well, yeah, your main book of business is Bass now,
Yeah.
Bob Downey.
Right. So it's been a transition. The surety bond stuff is, definitely taking a back seat to the fishing stuff. But to get back to your original question, that's kind of like all of that pulled me away from this dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Like most jobs do.
yeah, like a lot of jobs do.
No offense to jobs.
Yeah, we all got to work. We got to contribute it as citizens. And I enjoyed what I was doing. I genuinely did. I liked the company I worked for. I liked the bosses that I had were awesome. Like they still allowed me to take days off to fish local and regional tournaments, and we still fished a lot. Like I fished a bunch during that 10-year period, more so on the river, the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
We can kind of get into that more, but that's really where I learned how to fish things that were not natural lakes, like get away from the natural lake stuff that I grew up fishing. And that period is where I learned how to fish the river. And then in 2019, the Opens were coming to the river, one of them.
That's right. Yep.
Lacrosse. And I'd fished some BFLs before that. Not a lot, a couple of them, and had some okay success. And had some success at the regional level through the Bass Nation, like making it through the state tournament, getting on to regionals. I never qualified for a national tournament, but was close a few times.
That's a tough thing to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's
back then the rules have changed, I think, a little bit
now.
Too,
but yeah, so I had some more regional experience where I thought, and some BFL experience and stuff in college too, and locally on the river. Sure. And so it's like I want to fish that one on the river. Yeah. I want to at least see how I can do, right?
Absolutely.
And it's like if I'm gonna try the Opens. It's kind of a now or never deal. I think I was 30 at the time. So it's kind of that, for me anyways. I'm not saying that's for everyone. If you're past 30, it doesn't mean you can't qualify for the elites or at least try it, right?
Right.
That's just kind of what I thought in my head at the time. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to fish that one, I may as well jump into the first one on Toledo Bend and see how it goes. If I bomb out, I won't fish the rest of them, and I'll still fish the river.
Sure.
This was at a time prior to now where the Opens are like very difficult to get into, right?
Yeah, there's a waiting list for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
You had to link up with a co
at the yeah. So like you could I wouldn't say you could cherry pick them, but you could cherry pick them easier than you could now.
Was there divisions? Like
there was.
It was Toledo, lacrosse, and bingo bango.
Yeah, Grand Lake.
Yeah.
But there's actually 4 in 2 divisions that year. So we went to Smith Lake too.
Okay.
They changed that format a little bit every so often. There were 2 divisions in the Opens that year, and there were 4 tournaments in each division. I kind of liked it. I kind of liked it.
Nice touch. Yeah.
Because it's more than 3, like it traditionally is, but it's less than 9, like it is now.
Yep.
But it's still. I think the perfect number would be 2 divisions with 5 in each division. I think that would be reasonable for a working man. But that's a topic for another time. But at that time, it was 4 tournaments in each division. You only had to fish one of the divisions to qualify, and they took the top 5 in points in both divisions. So 10 guys made it.
Gotcha. Yep.
So anyways, so I figured I'd jump into that first one on Toledo, and to kind of get back to your original question, was this like, what I was going to do and set out to do? At that time, I was still like, no, I'm going to try it, right?
Sure.
I have a job I enjoy, but I'm at a point in my life where I feel like I want to try it and see how I would compete at the open level.
Right, like you wanted to get in the water and get the nipples wet and make sure like you didn't jump the heck out.
Yeah. Just see how it goes. And like that way later in life, if it didn't work out, I could look back with no regrets and say, at least I tried it to see how I would stack up against competition.
Absolutely.
But no expectation that I had this 3 to 4 to 5 year plan in the Opens to like, I'm going to do this for this long. I got this amount of money stashed away, and here's the amount of time I'm going to give myself to get into the elites. That was not my mindset.
Okay.
That was not my mindset at all.
So it was kind of like I'm going to see how this feels and go from there.
Yeah.
Cool. I can respect that.
And
I think that's good.
And I think having that, unbeknownst to me, but now looking back on it, I think that's maybe one reason why I had some success that year, because I wasn't putting any pressure on myself, like that this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm called to do in life. I didn't really know. I just wanted to see how I would do on the river. And then ultimately I signed up for the first one because I thought if I do well, then I'll try and get into Smith Lake, the next one, then the river, and then Grand. And it's just a wild story of kind of how it all played out.
Sure.
And like I feel I'm super grateful for the opportunity that I'm in right now, or the opportunity I've been given. I don't really fully understand like why I am where I'm at right now, because there's a lot of guys who would kill to be in my position that have had a better plan set out. Like I've got this money set aside. This is what I want to be doing. I'm going to give myself 5 years to do it, and I'm going to get to the elites. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know if there's like this sense of guilt of kind of like, I'm extremely grateful, I guess, for the opportunity and the situation that I'm in now, because it wasn't really obviously it was a dream, right, as a kid.
Yeah.
But it had been kind of put on the back burner and was part of this like far off, like I don't think it's ever going to happen, and then it happened, sort of thing. And I happened to have a good season in the Opens.
Yeah.
Right. And
so Toledo, what happened at Toledo
to
get you to Smith?
Yeah.
You know
So
what I mean?
Toledo, I finished 22nd in the first one.
Damn.
So kind
Hell
of a
yeah.
crazy story. Like so I go, it's in February.
Yep.
I'm living in Hudson, Wisconsin at the time.
Yep.
We have winter up here in the Midwest.
We do.
So this is kind of like goes back to somewhat of, I had a lot of experience in college that taught me how to travel and prepare for that. And I think that helped me a lot, but I made a big mistake the first one going to Toledo. I didn't check the weather forecast south of Minnesota. And I got stuck in a terrible blizzard in Kansas City. Like
Really?
white out, like could not see, had to spend the night. Like my intention was to make it to Toledo in like a day and a half. Ended up taking me 2.5 days.
Oh shit.
Lost out on basically a full day of practice. I think I only gave myself 3 days of practice anyways.
Sure. So you had 4 total?
I think I only had...
Or you had 3 total, but you were allowed 4 at the time, or?
At that time, you could practice as much as you want.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. So there were guys
shit.
down there like had been there for weeks, sort of deal.
Absolutely.
Now
Main
it's
guides,
now
everything.
Now it's different.
Sure.
But yeah, so I got 2.5 days of practice going in kind of cold in my first Open because I made a big mistake in not preparing to leave a day earlier. Got stuck in a blizzard. Had a marginal first day. I think I was in like the 40s or something. And then day 2 is canceled. So we're all sitting around, whatever. And then day 3 of the Open, it ended up just being a 2-day Open, and had a good day. Like caught him on a spinnerbait in muddy water in the dirt. Like in February, is like,
cool.
That was cool.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Leave there with the 22nd place finish. Is like, okay.
Right.
I better call Bass and get on the waiting list for Smith.
Yeah.
And so I called them right away. They're like, yep, it's full, but, we'll put you on the waiting list. I think it was in April. So we had a couple months until Smith.
Sure.
And ultimately, I'm calling Bass like every other week. Like, am I in? Am I not in? Am I in? Not in?
Because, like, it was how many people were on the waiting list and what meant you get in and what meant that you didn't.
Yeah, guys had to drop out.
Oh, so like you were like waiting for 80th place, 90th place, 110th place to say, hey, man,
Yeah.
the same for me.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, a lot of them probably had that 5-year plan, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
So anyway.
Yeah, so I'm on the waiting list calling bass every other week trying to get into Smith. Ultimately, I get in. It's like, okay, I'm going to give myself a little more practice time for Smith. We're going to go about this a little smarter. I think I gave myself 5 days of practice on Smith. And if you've never been to Smith Lake, it's super cool lake. I've never fished Hartwell, but I imagine it's like Hartwell. You're getting a lot of bites, spotted bass. There's largemouth in there too, but I had an absolute blast. Like one of those practices where you probably only needed 3 days, 2 days, 3 days, because when you have like 5 days and you're getting a lot of bites, like you end up finishing practice with waypoints all over the lake.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah, Aaron does that. Yep.
Like, and so
Aaron's good at plugging waypoints.
like 5 days on a tough tournament. Yeah. Okay. That's cool. That a lot of times is not a bad thing.
Right.
But I had stuff all over the place. Ended up, I think the day one had like 11 pounds and was in the 60s or something like that.
Sure.
And then day two had 12 pounds, not much more, a little bit more, but the weights were so tight. It's kind of like Hartwell where the weights are always so super tight in that like 10 to 14 pound range.
Yeah.
And
from
ended
a
up
point standpoint for sure. And
yeah,
then it seems like on Hartwell there's like one or two guys that'll bust them.
Yes.
But then like everybody else is in that spotted bass.
yes,
Like
that's how Smith is too.
like spotted bass lakes are that way.
Yeah,
I feel like.
yeah,
But
100%. And so I had a better day and moved up into the 30s. It's like, okay, cool. Cashed a check, sitting okay in the points, and now we go to the river next. It's like, oh, that's cool. So
Bob's in this thing, baby.
and so it's like, so then you start thinking like, like, well, this wasn't really my plan, but this is going okay. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, and now we're going to the river where I've fished the lacrosse pools a decent amount leading up to that time frame.
Yeah.
And felt like I had learned a lot in that 10-year period from graduating college to 2019. I fished the river more than I fished natural lakes. Part of it was because I lived in Hudson, and it was only an hour drive to get down to Pepin or Wabasha.
Mm-hmm.
And the river's so dynamic, and what intrigued me about it is how difficult it was for me to figure it out like the first year or two that I started fishing it.
Sure.
It was like a good challenge, like
Yeah.
different, right? Current, your water levels, depending on time of year,
Always
can
fluctuating.
change a lot.
Yep.
Water clarity changes a lot.
Yep.
Bait fish is different a lot of times in our natural lakes, at least depending on where you are on the river.
Yep.
So it really intrigued me, and that I felt like I learned so much during that 10-year period fishing the river. Not that I didn't learn a lot fishing natural lakes growing up in Minnesota, but I expanded my knowledge, I guess, a lot more during that 10-year period. And we were fishing tournaments on the river similar to the caliber of tournaments that you'd see on like Denny's on Tonka.
Yep.
It was at UMBCS.
Great. Yeah.
Which is, on pools
River rats.
4, 5, 6, 7. Those are like the studs on the river.
For sure.
And I'm by no means a stud on the river, but I want to compete
You're
against
a stud everywhere, Bob Downey.
No, I wanted to compete against them, and I learned a lot during that time period.
For sure. I
And
mean, you want to get good on the river, you fish against those guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To your point.
Yeah, and I just love that place. Like, it's beautiful down there.
It's so fun.
I can go there on a Saturday and get lost in the backwaters, and I'm not dealing with pleasure boaters or jet skiers. Like, I love it down there. It's natural. I don't know. There's something about the river that I fell in love with after college, and so it kind of holds a special place in my heart down there. But
this podcast is brought to you by my brother from another mother, my tournament partner, and the best rod builder north of the equator that still has 20/20 vision, Veselka Fishing and Customs, specializing in custom fishing rods. Your custom rod, the way you want it, because it has to be your rod. However, He has a wide variety to choose from, including his all-new for 2023 custom chicken rod. If you throw the big fluff, the hairy Gary, the rotisserie dissery, the half-ounce Palomalu, the 3/4-ounce rooster biscuit, the lightener looking like D. Snyder, you're going to want to be throwing the Veselka Fishing Chicken Special Big Hair Jig Rod. Mr. Veselka spent a lot of time on this rod, and it has the perfect action to throw, hook, and land those fish that you maybe pulled the bait out from because the rod was too stiff, or had them spit it because your rod didn't have the backbone. Well, the new Chicken Special from Veselka Fishing and Customs has worked to solve both of those issues, along with superior balance and quality components. So head on over to his website, veselkafishing.com. That's VOCELKA fishing.com. Pick this rod up before it's too late, because up here in the North Country, they about to be schooling. Are you ready to reel in your next home purchase or refinance? Supreme Lending's Dream Team can help guide you through the entire mortgage process, from pre-qualification to closing. They have a wide variety of home loan programs in their tackle box, including down payment assistance and first-time home buyer options. Just ask me. I trusted Aaron Daggis, a bass fisherman just like you and me, and Supreme Lending's Dream Team to help finance my first home. Contact Aaron Daggis and the Dream Team today by scanning the QR code or giving them a call at 763-326-0677. That's 763-326-0677. Did I catch a 7 in there? Or visit their website, aarondages.supremelending.com. That's AARONDAEGES.supremelending.com. I hear you on that, and I do want to get back into that, but I want to backtrack a little bit on the Smith Lake thing, because to me, your 33rd place finish on Smith Lake to me is something to be proud of as a guy who's gone to Hartwell from Minnesota.
Yeah.
Like, to me, the most different lake from what we fish. Like, they're even the river, I think it's quite a bit different in the sense of there's not much shallow. How did you, like,
break it down?
Break it down. Like, this is early Bob Downey. Like, this is pre Highland Reservoir Bob Downey. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say
like, how'd you catch him there?
Like,
yeah. I'm like mind blown, because you probably didn't have Panoptics.
No.
Or
I didn't.
Like,
I had
or forward facing sonar, excuse me.
Yeah. The boat I qualified out of was a Pantera 2 Bass Cat, 19 foot with the 200, and I had one graph at the driver's seat and one graph up front. No 360, no forward facing, but that was kind of
It was pre.
Forward facing was like we were getting there, right? In
like, did Jason Christie win on St. Clair yet? Because
2016.
Okay.
But he was using Panoptics, which I think was a little bit different than live scope.
Less of a detailed cone angle. So if you're cracking a tube, it does that. Like, yeah. So anyway.
But we were close, and I say we were close because in that tournament was the first time I heard about a guy fishing for suspended spotted bass in the middle of a creek channel. Like one of my travel, I think it was a buddy I traveled with or a guy I was sitting next to in weighing line. I cannot remember, but he's like, dude, you won't believe what my pro was doing today. And I was like, really? He's like, you won't believe it. He's like, he's fishing over 80 feet of water for spotted bass with this like scope thing. I was like, what? And so that was like right before it, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And so there were guys doing it in that tournament.
Really?
I was not one of them. I didn't know what I didn't know what that was at the time.
Me either.
And I was always kind of one that was slow to adopt technology. Like, I didn't have 360 at the time either. I still had a Fortrex. And so anyways.
Well, this was pre, like, sparks flying.
Yeah.
Like, this is like.
Yeah.
The drums were just starting to play here.
Yeah.
You know?
So I had 5 days, and I knew the potential of a largemouth bite there, but it's kind of hit or miss. But if you hit it, you might win with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's how Hartwell is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my buddy, Caleb Kufal, he won that tournament and had some largemouth. Looking back on it, but
he seems like a good dude.
Yeah, good dude, heck of a fisherman.
Love to have him on sometime. I feel like he's
a good dude.
Hammer.
Yeah,
anti-forward facing sonar a little
very
bit
much
from what I've seen.
Yeah.
He's got a little bit of block it in him.
A lot of block it in him. Yeah, yeah. Really good dude. Kind of quiet, stays to himself, but he can catch him. If there's a jig bite going on, he'll
won
find
2
it.
events
Yeah.
or 3. Has he won 2 or 3 events?
2,
and he
almost 3, and
like,
almost $1 grand.
I mean, there's not a lot of fishermen on this earth
Yeah.
that can say they've done that. So
yeah. So, anyways, he won that event. But what I ended up settling on was catching spots, blind fishing for them on beds. They're spawning, but you couldn't see them. But
that's river fishing 101. Bob.
Like I could ultimately determine what banks they were liking to spawn on, and you could find the right pockets. And it was my first major use of the Ned rig.
Okay.
I caught them all on a Ned rig, just skipping around bank like that or under the walkways around cables, that sort of deal.
How did you figure out they're spawning? Because we know when largemouth and smallmouth spawn, but how do you get keyed in on when them spots spawn? Because they're gypsies, full on.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it was a matter of covering a bunch of water in the tournament. You couldn't really go back down the same stretches you were practicing on, but you knew they were spawning because bite, miss, throwback, bite, miss, throwback the 4th time, finally hooked the fish.
Right. It's throw here, don't get bit. Throw here, don't get bit.
It's okay,
bite, miss, bite, miss.
Yeah, that fish is spawning, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there was that going on, and then I was throwing a little 3.5-inch line through swim bait for largemouth a little bit too.
Cool.
In kind of the backs of the pockets.
Sure.
But otherwise, it was mainly that spotted bass spawn and deal with a Ned going down, your clay or your riprap banks. They really like to spawn around riprap for some reason. Spotted bass, at the base of riprap. And I didn't really.
Oh, at the bottom of it?
Yeah, where
deep?
It tails off. I would say 10 foot or less, probably.
Okay. Yeah, because smallmouth, it seems on leech, I've caught them spawning as deep as 18 feet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I didn't know.
And I imagine they spawn deeper than 10 feet.
I would assume.
It just seemed like if you've ever, you see how smallmouth relate to rock veins and how they'll spawn, where that rock meets the sand a lot of times.
Yeah.
Same thing with spots with the riprap, where that riprap ends and hits natural bottom. That's kind of what they were keyed on.
Right. What's that thing that jacks through that the construction guys work on?
Jackhammer?
Yeah. Smallmouth don't know how to use a jackhammer nor access one, so they can't call their buddy over there. Hey, Willie, can I have that jackhammer when you're done so I can make this bed on top of this rock?
Yeah.
They can't do that, right? So that makes perfect sense. But spots, from what I've heard anyway, they don't stay on the bed
not for
as long.
No.
And it's kind of this magical, spontaneous experience, just like humans.
And I ran into yes. And I ran into that on day 2. In practice, I got some clues. First day of the tournament, really kind of struggled outside of I caught one good largemouth that kind of saved my day.
Sure.
11 pounds, right? It wasn't. It's but on 11 pounds on Smith is a decent bag.
I mean, that smoked that 10.5-pound bag. You beat him by 50 places.
Yeah, so it's not like it crushed him. But then day 2, 12 pounds, not much more than 11, right? But on Smith, the weights were so tight that it moved me up. And I happened to run into one of those, whatever you might want to call it, spontaneous magical bank, right?
Yeah, Marvin Gaye was playing down this bank in Luther Vandross. And it's okay, Luther Vandross is here today.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I ran into that day 2 and it was wow, this is really happening. And then weigh in a decent bag and finish in 30s. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, talk about an ideal scenario for and not taking nothing away from that, but like, if you're a guy coming from Minnesota to Smith Lake without forward-facing sonar, and the spots are spawning versus not spawning, like, that was, I hear what you're saying a little bit with like what the fuck, like
what's happening.
It's almost like you were on this Bassmaster adventure. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like this.
Yeah, that's why
there wasn't a business plan, so to speak, with it. It was just, we're gonna go to Florida and then we're gonna see what happens, and no plan.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
And you hear that a lot these days. Guys on tour will say, you know, the reason I did so well is because I didn't care, right? Well, they care a lot. Right? They care a lot. You prepare a lot. You dial in your stuff a lot. But what they mean by that is, I think, not putting as much pressure on yourself as maybe the next guy would to succeed or to do well. And therefore, you're maybe more open-minded. You're a little more free. And I think you just flow better that way. And I feel like that's what happened in the Opens that year because I kind of had like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And that's why I kind of that's why I say I almost feel a little guilty that it happened that way, because some guys are like, I'm all in, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it until it happens, sort of thing. And I almost feel like that might put too much pressure on a guy at times.
So Andy Walls and I were literally having this pretty much same conversation yesterday, and like we were talking about Keith Tuma a little bit, who's a good friend of ours, and he was, man, like
he's been killing it this year.
He's been killing it, but he had, like, I think about like Walls was telling me about, like, he's won some tournaments where he was just not doing good, and he just said he stopped caring and just went out and had fun, and like, I have such a hard time with that. But we were talking about Keith Tuma, who's 7th in points going into, and there's 3 events left. They take the top 9 in EQ. Keith Tuma, first guy from the Northern Lakes area, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
To do that. And Keith Tuma is a guy who does pretty good when he doesn't care. And I think about just, he'll probably never say this, but what he's going through right now, or the pressure he felt, you know, and you fish different maybe under that.
I think so.
I care a lot. That's my issue. And I think I really put a lot of pressure on myself with anything I do, whether it's fishing, but I love fishing. So I obviously put the most pressure on myself with that. And I think it hinders me a lot. Yeah. Now that you mention it.
It's hard not to, though, right? I mean, I think it's human nature when we care about something so much and we want to succeed. You put pressure on yourself naturally. And I absolutely do now at the elite level, 100%. Sure. And we can get into that more, and I feel like that affected me a little bit my first couple years on tour. Yeah. But
well, the river. Yeah. So the river. Yeah. I love the river. Yeah. And I think I can relate a lot with, maybe not the same, but with rivers and what they teach you growing up on lakes and not fishing rivers your whole life. And I've had a lot of light bulb moments on the river, committing myself to current, committing myself out there. And the time you spent is probably more significant than even what I spent. So I think that's cool. And I think rivers, I think there's a lot of parallels with current and lakes with current, or rivers with current, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, you learn to read how fish set up on stuff, and their seasonal movements is a different thing than natural lakes. It's somewhat similar. Largemouth is pretty similar. The smallmouth do some different things. But yeah, you learn a lot. And my mom's side of the family, I have a couple uncles who are diehard fly fishermen. That's all they do. Like, they're into fly fishing like we're into bass fishing.
I respect
travel
that.
all over there to do it. Yeah. And they are the ones that kind of taught me how to read current as a younger kid. Yeah. They'd take me wet wading on smallmouth streams, and we'd fish for smallmouth on small rivers. And that really opened my eyes to current and how to read it and how fish relate to it and how they use it to their advantage. And it's just something my first 18, 20 years of my life I didn't know much about, because I grew up fishing natural lakes. And so Yeah, that was a really impressionable time of my life, I guess, the 10 years after college where I fished it a lot. And I think it's one reason why I love to power fish shallow too, still to this day, because that's kind of what you do on the river. It's maybe changing a little bit, but it's still pretty shallow power fishing for the most part.
Shallow
there.
At least, and
Yeah.
I haven't felt like I mean, aside from maybe on Pepin on a calm day or something, felt like I needed to finesse them too much. However, like watching Matt Thompson catch him on that hair jig, it was pretty cool, and I think I need to.
I heard about that. That was intriguing to me too.
I've had a couple light bulb moments with it, but I had not like that.
Yeah. So I had good experience on the river. Wouldn't call myself like a river rat by any means, but felt comfortable there, right? And so going into that third open is like, wow, this is quite an opportunity we have here in front of us. And of course, it seems like every time I've fished a big tournament on the river, which is now only, I guess I shouldn't say every time. I've only fished a couple big ones. The elite event the other year, the open, some of those BFLs. It seems to tighten up and fish tough, right?
Yep.
So you go into it with high hopes that you're going to run across something, and I really struggled in practice. Like really struggled.
For that event.
Yeah, for the open.
Sure.
It like ran all my typical stuff, is like not happening. So then you get all that out of your system the first couple days of practice, then it's like, okay, ground zero, we need to like look at this from a different lens.
Sure.
And just fish new water, fish new stuff. And tried to do that. Felt like I had a decent game plan, but it's still, the river with 200 boats on it, and it can fish small when you put that many boats on it. And first day I struggled.
Sure.
I had like 9 pounds, down in the 90s.
Because where were you in points going into that? And were you starting to think about things now?
Yes.
Like, were you, okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was probably in the top 20 in points.
Sure.
Maybe top 15.
Yeah.
And they took the top 5 in points.
Right.
So you're starting to think about it, especially going into a place you're familiar with.
Yeah.
So it's like first day, not good, right?
Right.
Sitting in the 90s or something.
Yep.
And so then I'm thinking, okay, well, this, magical ride we've been on has now come to a screeching halt. Like the dream's done. Like this is probably not going to happen.
Sure.
So then day 2, you're a little more relaxed. Like, okay, well, we just go have fun today.
Right.
End up catching 14 something pounds, like one of the biggest bags of day 2, and move up into the 30s.
Jesus.
It's like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And get paired with a guy from my co-angler that day was a guy from St. Croix, part of their marketing department. Wow. So you make a connection there that then turns into a relationship now. It's like
that's crazy.
Stuff happened that year that was kind of unexplainable,
right, in
many ways. And so, we had to end up cashing a check, and now we're sitting, I think I was 7th in the points after that. So I was like, wow, still not in Grand. Hadn't signed up for Grand.
And you might not get in.
So I called back.
Holy smokes, dude.
Yeah. This is what I'm telling you.
7th in the points, and you didn't even know if you'd get a shot to make it to 5th.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So then
why have I never heard this before?
Yeah, I don't know. I've told like close family, friends. But yeah, it was a wild year, man. That's why I say, like, to be where I'm at now, I'm extremely thankful, because I can't really explain certain things of why I'm here. But
I can. But it's probably meant to be, from the sounds of it.
That's what it seems like.
Like if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
And
it's even like it's crazier at Grand. Like we finally so I got a call Bass, like, hey, I need, I want to get in that last tournament, which thankfully, typically at the end of the open season, the last couple tournaments are easier to get into because guys have started to drop out. that signed up for all 4 at the beginning, or all 9 at the beginning, or whatever it is for that
80th
year.
place is like 3 80th places, or like
So I called Bass, and I think in like 2 weeks they're like, "Yep, you're in for a grand." It's like, sweet.
Were you like losing it?
Yeah, like
for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was like,
yeah,
we have a shot to make it to the elites, and I am not in this tournament yet.
right.
And we need to get in. So like I was saying, I called like every other week trying to get into Smith.
Yeah.
His,
That's what you do.
I mean, it's probably an exaggeration, but it felt like every other day I was calling Bass.
Probably turned into every day.
Yeah,
after that
like-
lacrosse tournament.
Like the lady was
where we
probably
at, boss?
getting tired of me calling, but
She's over it.
yeah. So we got into Grand, and
had you been to Grand before?
never been.
'Kay.
No,
'Kay.
had never been. Did some research and kind of found a couple zones that I wanted to focus on.
Based on what what kind of research were you doing?
Just typical, like reading articles online and
Sure.
looking at results. I didn't talk to anybody the year I fished the Opens. I don't really have a network across the country to like call buddies, or I didn't stay with anyone or work with anyone in the Opens. So it's pretty
Mhm.
much just research on my own. And
That's gangster. I like it.
I didn't know anyone. So I just kind of went in doing my own sort of map study and tournament results for September, that time of year.
Grimy time of year too.
Very grimy. Yeah. Anytime you get south of like, Iowa in September is like, you're going to be dealing with a tough bite
For sure.
and hot. And I stayed in a tent that year for all the Opens.
So you tented it for all of them.
Yeah.
That's badass, dude.
Yeah. So I was in a tent, and,
I've never finished bad when I stay in a tent.
Yeah?
No, one time. Yeah, never mind.
yeah.
Twice. Yeah. There's something to the tent thing. That's some Rick Clunn, like,
Yeah.
voodoo talk to nature shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was in a tent that year, and in Oklahoma in September that week, it was like 95 to 100 each day, and hot at night too. I remember going to Walmart and buying a fan for the tent, and I had to, like,
I don't know how you don't.
it was bad. It was hot, like miserably hot, and
And you camped alone.
yeah,
Just-
camped alone. Yeah, ended up camping next to Caleb Kufall at Smith, the river, and Grand. Like, not on purpose, but we
Right.
ended up at the same places.
Crazy.
And he stayed in the back of his truck.
Sure.
Still does.
Yep. I like that.
Yeah. And so we didn't really talk about fishing, like compare notes, but we would just exchange pleasantries. Hey, how you doing? That sort of deal. Get to know each other a little better, but we weren't really talking about patterns or.
I mean, by that time, you knew he was flipping a Texas rigger or jig, so
Yeah.
you didn't really need to ask him a whole lot. Like,
Yeah.
you getting them? Or
Yeah. And so after practice, like first day of practice, I'm thinking I need to be offshore, like fish brush piles, rock, that sort of deal. September, kind of a weird time of year.
That's where your
Grand.
research kind of led you?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I'm doing that. I haven't had a bite, maybe one bite halfway through the day. And I was like, gosh, those bushes look pretty good up there. And there's some willow trees and buckbrush. And I've done that on the river a lot, flipped a lot of wood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I went up there.
September deal.
Yeah. Not in maybe in September
I
on the
don't even
river.
know.
I don't know. But kind of atypical for Grand in September. But went up there and fished I think I fished 50 yards and I caught a 6-pounder. It's like, that's interesting. Go to the next stretch, catch like a 3.5. It's like, Start seeing bait, like good water clarity, that greenish blue color, seeing bait everywhere.
Yep.
Go to the next stretch, catch like a 4-pounder. It's like, wow. And like that day, I think I had 19 pounds, which for Grand that time of year was good.
Hell yeah, it's good.
Any time of year, maybe on Grand, that's
I
decent.
feel like in the South in September, that's good.
So I was like, this is interesting. That was day one. I think I gave myself 4 days of practice.
So day one of practice, you had 19
Yeah.
pounds. And you're like,
yeah. So then I try and run that pattern elsewhere on the lake, like up the Elk. The Elk's kind of a popular area, some other mid-lake areas the next 2 days. And it wasn't great. It was like
Interesting.
I think one day up the Elk I caught maybe 12, 13 pounds, which was still okay. But the rest of the areas, it wasn't good. And it looked similar, very similar.
Really?
Couldn't duplicate it. Then on day 4, I went back with a hitchhiker.
Yeah.
I hardly ever do that. Like
I do it, but
do you?
In Minnesota, like I don't know how that works. And the fish,
Sure.
I think, move a lot more around in the South, where it's like when you find a school in Minnesota, like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you just want to go easy on them.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe.
And I think our familiarity with these bodies of water up here allows us to do that more effectively, maybe, than on a foreign body of water.
I'd have a really hard time on a foreign body of water.
Like, you want to maybe stick 1 or 2 of those to make sure they're not, 10-inch spotted bass or.
But if I'm
whatever.
going to recheck a spot that I already caught them, like 19 pounds, to me, then it makes a lot of sense to not go catch 19 pounds again.
Exactly. And so that's why I did it. And I didn't go like down the same stretches.
Okay.
But this area I was in was big. Like there
So
was
it's an area of the lake.
Yeah,
Got
a
it.
lot of this cover was in this area of the lake, and there was a lot of it that I didn't fish that first day.
Sure.
And so the first half of the 4th day of practice, I sampled a few areas and shook off like 3 or 4 of them, and was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. There's still a lot more water that I haven't touched, so I just kind of cruised around and marked stuff that looked good but didn't fish it necessarily.
Sure.
So I was kind of all in on that deal. And mind you, this was day 1 of practice, and it still has held up now to the 4th day of practice, which never, like, very rarely does a pattern hold that strong for an entire 7-8 day period.
That thought occurred when you mentioned it, when you mentioned the first day of practice thing on a southern body of water, because it's typically like you want to kind of like find it like 2 days before or a day before. But
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like,
Yeah, so that was going on too. Like another weird thing, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that's like, this shouldn't be happening.
was there a lot of people in that area? Like,
Yeah, there was.
Really?
Including Caleb and some other top finishers, but a lot of guys that, like, for whatever reason, maybe they were throwing more of a reaction deal, I don't know, but they just weren't. Like, I don't know if I just had utmost confidence doing it, so I was fishing it more thoroughly, or what the deal was. But it was a big enough area of the lake. Like, I didn't see Caleb. But after the tournament, comparing notes, apparently we were both in that general, probably 2-3 mile area.
well, I think about this, right? So you said you found it the first day of practice. So you did all this research that told you to fish offshore brush piles.
Yeah, and
And
rock.
offshore and rock and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And most people wouldn't be able to abandon that after a half day trying it. They would say, I'm not doing this right, either with my hands or in the
Sure.
right area. You know what I mean? So,
Sure.
like, one thing that, because I have a tough time with that sometimes, is I'll, to your point, there was an area of the lake that was specific, right?
Yeah.
So it's like maybe I'm doing the right thing in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So to me, you might have had a head start on everybody on that pattern because you were willing to abandon what wasn't working right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think it was, looking back on it, more of a trust in your gut deal that
Sure.
at the time I didn't realize really what I was doing, but it was just like, hey, that looks good. Let's go sample it real quick. And I happened to catch that 6 like right away. So then it gave me confidence to keep doing it.
For sure.
Maybe you fish a couple of those stretches and don't get a bite, and all of a sudden you abandon it. But I got fortunate and caught that one. And so then practice is done, right? And had a decent practice, I felt like.
Sounds like it.
And looking back on it, I think the reason those fish were up there is in 2019, Oklahoma had a ton of high water, like a bunch of rain,
Sure.
to the point where in the spring, Grand Lake was unfishable. All the ramps were underwater. It literally didn't
Sure.
get pressure for a couple months that year.
Oh, wow.
And that water was coming down, but still high. And so I think this didn't click until after the tournament.
Sure.
But I think the reason they were up there is because that water had been high all year, and those fish had been living up there all year. And it was still high enough for them to be living up there during our tournament in September.
Right. Well, you think about that, the bait's going there.
Yeah.
For the fall migration deal
right.
too. So it's like, why would they leave if the bait's coming?
And it was like
them?
a perfect storm. Like it was hot. So, but we were, days are getting shorter. So fish no fall's coming, but we were still in somewhat of a stable late summer pattern. And I think that's why that pattern held true the whole time.
Sure.
We hadn't had like a major cold front to affect that bite yet. But anyways, so day one was good. Like I lost my first fish of the day. Is like a 3.5, jumped off right at the boat, and then my co-angler catches a 4-pounder right behind me on the next tree. So I'm thinking, well, this is not a good start. But then things started to roll a bit, and I think I had like 17 something day one. Okay, like so decent. I think I was
this on that first stretch you found partially?
Yeah, it actually was. Yeah. First stretch. Fished a couple other stretches, including a new one I hadn't fished, and caught one of my biggest ones at the end of the day doing that. Just running the pattern, right?
That's a huge confidence booster.
Yeah. And all just flipping wood and willows or buckbrush. And so I had a good day. I think I was in the top 10 or something like that, maybe top 5. And then day 2, I had 2 fish at like noon.
Oh, so you went and ran it again, and it was tougher.
Yeah.
Huh.
Ran it again. It's a huge area, so I still was able to fish new water, but I ran some of my better stretches too, right?
Yep.
Apparently didn't really replenish, or I just didn't run into them. There was so much flooded wood that it was very easy to fish through those areas and like miss a fish, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't like an isolated
rainforest,
dock or isolated tree on its own. There was a lot of stuff in the water.
I've seen the buckbrush banks when the water's high, and I don't know how you pick that shit apart all day. Like,
I was keying in on little points, kind of.
Sure.
If there was a dead willow tree sitting out a little deeper than the buckbrush on a point, that was real key.
Sure.
But there were little, like, so much like how we fish a weed line, right? You're looking for little differences.
Yep.
Points or bare spots or an isolated bush here and there, isolated grass patch.
Game of Where's Waldo.
Yeah.
Yep.
So similar stuff. But anyways, day 2 ran it, and it was really tough. Had 2 fish at noon. Ran a new stretch and caught one good one. So I left that area with 3 fish, running back towards weigh-in with 3 fish.
So you're leaving this area that's good, going just towards weigh-in.
Towards weigh-in. Like,
how much time did you have?
I was probably I think I got back to that area with about 45 minutes left. Back to the general area of weigh-in and takeoff, which is in Wolf Creek. Wolf Creek's a pretty big creek.
Did you have stuff to do there?
A little bit.
Sure.
But it was basically like just I had marked some stuff that looked similar to what I was fishing. I hadn't fished it yet.
Sure.
So that's what I got in my head. I said, I'm going to run back. I'll fish that stretch. I have 3 fish in my live well. Like, if I don't catch another bass, like, Elite Dreams are gone. And
how big were those? Did you have 3 good ones, or did you have
2 decent ones, 1 good one?
Sure.
So I bet I had like maybe 8 pounds.
Okay.
A couple 2-pounders and maybe one close to 4.
So you had a thug and then a couple baby thugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But kind of running back, like, dreams are kind of shattered. Like, unless we catch, we're going to have to
get...
Day
2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to have to get pretty lucky to make it on to day 3.
Because what was the cut? Because you were in what going into day 2 again? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I was in I want to say I was in the top 10 or the top 5 after day 1.
Yep. And then to make day 3, they took the
top 10.
Oh. Yeah. So you were like, I don't got a limit. Fuck.
Yeah, I'm going to fall out of the top 10. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get back to Wolf Creek, and I fish this stretch, and like right away I catch, like a like a 2-pounder or something like that.
That's
Okay,
magical.
we got 4, right? All right.
One more bite, baby.
It's like 2.5 pounder. So maybe you have 10 and a half pounds. We keep going down that stretch, get to like one of the last little stretches of bushes until we got to check in. And I set on this one, like way down in this buck brush, like, and it's stuck, is not coming out.
Yeah.
You're going to lose that fish 70% of the time.
Yeah.
You've got it pinned. You can feel its head shaking.
Buckbrush is unforgiving and snaggy as hell.
Yeah.
That's what I know.
The fish is stuck. He's probably got leverage on you and is going to get off. Well, somehow I get up there, like get down in there, get up to like past my shoulder, like digging. It was kind of deep down in there. Get the fish out of there, and it's a 4-pounder with like 15 minutes to go.
And all of a sudden, Bob Downey is fishing day 3, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Damn, dude. Okay, so what'd you weigh for a bag that day?
I think I had 14 and a half, 15 pounds.
That's surviving, baby.
Yeah, which actually moved me up to, I want to say,
You moved up with that.
I was like in second or third, I think.
That's right, dude. I remember because I was watching.
So once again, like, same theme. Like, why is this happening? This is crazy. Like, must be a meant to be sort of deal. So then we go into day 3, only the top 10 fish.
What is going through your head now?
Yeah.
Right?
So
Bob
now
Downey,
I'm
this
running-
came from like
Now I'm running the numbers, right? So I'm looking at the standings.
gets his calculator out
Yeah,
immediately.
yeah.
I love it.
Got to be top 5 in points to make the elites, right?
Yeah.
And then if you win it, you get a classic berth. But that's not really on my mind. Like,
No.
getting to the elites is on my mind at this point.
Yep.
I do the math. Just so happens, which typically does happen in the opens as you get towards the end of the year, it seems like guys come up pretty clutch for whatever weird reason. Like, guys up in the standings a lot of times will come up clutch and have good tournaments. The top, I think I was 7th in the points going into that last one. The top 6 guys in front of me outside of one guy all had really good events. Really good events.
Oh, man.
So I'm doing the math, and I've got to finish top 3 to make the elites. And I'm in second place going into the last day.
Holy smokes. I'm like, you know what, that first time you go to Valley Fair and you ride Power Tower?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'm feeling that with you right now.
Yeah, so
Yep.
that's kind of, you asked what I was feeling. That's kind of what I was feeling going in the last day. So you think, oh, great, we made a top 10. We're for sure going to be in the elites. And you can fall to 10th and you're still going to make it. It's like, no, you got to catch them tomorrow.
Yeah, you can't order pizza at 9 a.m.
Yeah,
You can't
so
do
it's
you
like-
wish you could do. Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those moments where you can only put so much pressure on yourself until you kind of just got to let it go and let it be what it's going to be, sort of thing.
Yep.
Hard to do. Easy to say, hard to do, I think. But it's kind of one of those things that you have to do in those moments. I've had a moment like that on the elites where I was, going into the last tournament of the year, and if I didn't make the cut, I was going to get cut off the elites on my second year.
That's crazy.
You make the cut, you'll stick around. So it's kind of one of those moments where, work your hardest, go do what you can do as best as you can, and let the chips fall where they may. And if it's meant to be, it's going to happen. If not, then it wasn't meant to be, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I went into that last day of the tournament on Grand, sitting in second. Got to be top 3 to make the elites. Top
You
3.
busted him day 3, though, Bob Downey.
Yeah, so day 3 in the morning, my first 2 bites were 5-pounders.
Yeah, baby. Oh.
So it was
Oh.
like, and one was hung, of course, right?
In the buck?
In a willow.
Oof.
So I'm like, I didn't have to go in after it, but you stick it and it's hung, and you kind of just keep pressure, right? As you're moving towards it, somehow it swam out and then you land it. Once again, why did this happen? I don't know, but that's what happened.
Well, I'll tell you why. It's because you had Bob Downey and an all-terrain tackle AT jig, and that's
Yeah.
that's like peanut butter and jelly, baby.
Yeah. No, it was what I love to do, flipping a jig
It's
and
one of the best jigs for wood fishing.
flipping
too.
a Texas rig.
That AT jig comes through wood better than
It's good.
I don't know if it comes through wood really good.
It's good wood jig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wooden docks. It's great. Yeah.
Good dock jig too. But yeah, so had a good start to the morning. Had a guy from Japan as my co-angler that day. Actually traveled with Takumi Ito.
No way.
For the Grand Lake Open. That was the year Takumi qualified too in 2019 through the Centrals. And for me that was perfect because he couldn't speak English. Not that I'm like don't want to be chatty and like don't want to be friendly in the boat, but I had a job to do that day and I needed to be focused. And so for me, it was like, okay, this is actually good. Like, we're not going to, like, I can focus on what I need to do.
Yeah.
I try to say that, I guess, in the nicest way possible. Because I like,
no, I know what you mean 100%.
Co's with me, but it can be distracting at times too.
For sure.
When you need to be doing your job. And so for me, and that it was like perfect situation from Japan. We could talk a little bit. Like he was super cool. I follow him on social media. Yeah. He's a really cool dude. Told me
that's who I want day 3. I want a guy who can't speak my language. So like I can focus.
Yeah.
You know?
And he was good. He was catching him behind me. He's using Tokyo rig. I was like, what is that thing? It's like, Tokyo rig. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, so anyways, cool co-angler, had a fun day. One of those fortunate days, same deal, had a better day, had a limit by the time I left that area.
Okay. That's good.
Right.
Yeah.
But I had, I don't know if I had high 16s or 17 when I left that area.
So you had 2 5-pounders and some peanuts.
Yeah.
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 So you felt like you needed a call still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I ran back, same deal, gave myself maybe a half hour to fish that stretch. And I caught a 2.5 pounder and called out a 2 pounder. And I won by 8 ounces. Yeah.
And you won the Bassmaster Open on Grand Lake.
Yeah.
Which punched your ticket to not only the Bassmaster Classic, but the Bassmaster Elite Series. So where did you end up? And did you end up?
I ended up 5th in points.
Sweet baby Jesus, I gotta pee. That is beautiful.
Childhood dreams coming true, and
yeah,
also shocked, like what just happened, sort of deal. Like not only at Grand, but the whole season.
Yeah.
You know, what are we going to do now? We got a full-time job, but we just qualified for the elites. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Not much national tournament experience.
Right.
I fished some regional events, fished some college stuff. You know, these are all questions that come into my head as things progress more. You know, right away there's a lot of excitement and joy, right? And the fastest drive home from a southern fisher I've ever had in my life because you're so excited. And
did you cry right away, or did it set in like at a different time and you cried your eyes out on the way home?
That night when I was driving home,
I know you cried.
Yeah,
like no one does that and not cries.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bawl my eyes out if it ever happens. But
yeah. It's like, yeah, just one of those meant to be things. Like people talk about that a lot, right? Especially in tournament wins. Oh, it's meant to be. It's my week. Couldn't do anything wrong. And a lot of people are like, yeah, that's pretty cliche to say that. You know, what's that mean? Why do people say that? And I now, after that year in that tournament, I fully understand what that means.
To me, it's like you can't force it, right?
Can't force it, and things just happen that you can't really explain.
Sure.
And that's a lot of what happens in tournament fishing, man. It's like,
which is crazy, right? But I mean, it happens in hockey. It happens in
life.
Other things where there's, you know, a weird bounce off the boards and all of a sudden, you know, Vegas wins the Stanley Cup or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And life works a lot that way.
100%. Yeah.
And luck is kind of this voodoo thing where it's like it's cheap looking from the outside, but if you're the one experiencing luck who put in the effort, it's a lot different.
Yeah, I mean, there's
scenario.
a lot of like, luck's a hard thing to describe or like understand if it's really a thing or not in fishing, and I think it can be in short stints.
Right.
But
like if you didn't qualify for the Classic this year, you weren't still there, right? People could maybe say, well, that was luck. But you were maybe thinking to yourself, who's saying that now when you're just getting there, right?
Yeah.
So, but I didn't mean to take you off your track, because I think you're going an awesome direction with the like, now I have a full-time job.
Yeah.
And now I qualified for the Elite Series. Mm-hmm. So now I have a big decision to make, because the Elite Series isn't like, it's not like I have an NHL contract, rookie contract from the NHL for $1 million a year or something like that, right? It's, no, I still have to pay to go.
Yeah. So you start running numbers and, you got to pony up a lot of money. And for me,
what's the delta on something like that? When you were running those numbers of like, okay, so I have to call my boss and tell him that I'm taking, I'm going to say no to the net X amount thousand per year.
Yeah.
Because I need to pay X amount thousand per year.
Yeah.
Over here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I left a job that was very comfortable and retirement, and
did it kind of allow you to make that Opens plunge? Like that job allowed you to save up, and it allowed you to build a little bit of a cushion to go on that adventure?
100% it did. And so
it's tough to leave the thing that got you there too.
Yeah. So the job was 100% the reason why I could buy a Bass Cat boat to even fish out of in the Opens in 2019, and also afford the entry fees without any. I didn't have sponsors.
Right.
All Terrain, helped me out with some product, but I didn't have any sponsors when I fished the Opens.
You had a bag of jigs and a Bass Cat, baby.
Yeah, that's all I had. And so then you qualify for the Elites, and trying to get ready for that from a sponsor standpoint, from a new boat standpoint, from a, potentially leaving a portion of my career standpoint there's a lot to consider in that moment for someone that was kind of one leg in, one leg out in this adventure to begin the 2019 season.
Because what was the window between when you found out you qualified to your first tournament, or like
entry fee,
right?
Typically, the first entry fee for the Elites is due the first or second week of November.
And the tournament was in September that you'd fished on. Grant.
Yeah, so I had about a month and a half, 2 months to figure out what I wanted to do. Yeah,
dude, that's a wild scenario to be put in, because to your point, you don't have no sponsor stuff built up, and then
so it was
wow. It's a tough spot.
It was a tough spot. I mean,
it's a great spot.
It's hard to complain about that spot I was in. It's a good, I guess you might call it a good problem to have, and super thankful that the boss I had and still have to this day is like very understandable, very accommodating. I definitely was going to take a pay cut by trying to fish the Elites, but he also could have said, hey, no, we'd rather you just not work for us at all. But he said, yeah, you can continue to do what you're doing to an extent. It's going to be less risk on our part, because it's going to be all sales and commission based and not salary based.
Sure.
But it still gave me a potential steady income for my first couple of years on tour.
That's a big deal.
Which allowed me to, do what I needed to do to make that decision that, okay, I'm going to give this a go. I have some money saved up from working the last 10 years. I'll still have some steady income coming in. My sponsor support and those relationships will begin, but as a rookie on the Elites, you're not really making much from that standpoint, from a sponsor standpoint, unless you're maybe someone that has built up those relationships for a long time prior to qualifying, which I wasn't that guy. I was just kind of chose not to be because I had a full-time job doing something else, and just chose to focus on getting better at fishing first and foremost.
Yep.
And that was the path that was best for me. I'm not saying that's a path that's best for everyone, but that's what worked for me. And
well, there's nuggets to be taken out of that. Is like you got better at fishing, which clearly you did, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it's like there's people who can do it a different way, but I think if you're not developing as an angler, you're going the wrong direction, right?
Yeah.
So you developed as like the key attribute.
Yeah.
But the business side is what you're saying. And
yeah, I think in a perfect world, if that's like what you want to do, I think it makes sense to start those relationships when you're fishing the opens, and understand that you're maybe not going to be making money doing it, but you're setting a foundation with those partners and those people that in the long term, if you do make it, then you've got a nice foundation built to grow with them. Right. Whereas I started that foundation my rookie year, and it's grown since then. But when I was a rookie, I had zero expectations on what sponsor contracts were going to look like. I basically just wanted to start a relationship with a company. Didn't really care what they paid or what they provided. Just wanted to start those relationships, build a foundation, do what I could for them, and then kind of grow from there. And that's kind of the position I was in because I didn't put much effort into it prior to that.
Was it the type of thing where was the thing about you is that I've noticed is you're an extremely humble guy, which is like one of my favorite things about you, because I try to pride myself on being that way because A, it's a humbling sport, and B, I was just raised that way. And I really like that about you, Bob. And I guess, but there's an idea of when you make the elites that, you know, this money comes to you. And I guess I think that is probably a misconception that has been debunked, you know, with the advancement of YouTube and modern technology. But I guess was that a challenge you didn't see coming with that?
Yeah, for sure. And it still is today. Yeah. To be honest. Like, and I think 100% there's definitely a misconception there. I mean, it's an expensive bill to do it each year. If you think of it from a personal side, if you think of it from a business side, you know, annual business expense is probably more than what small business expense is probably more than what we're spending each year.
But so is the income probably.
Right. But the income coming back is also, you know, more for a small business than what we're probably generating too, depending on who you are and what sort of tournament success you have. But yeah, it's expensive to do what we do. And so it takes time to build those relationships and get to a point where you can be profitable doing it. Yeah. And that's why having the job that I had going into it, and still have to a very small extent now, like I've had to give up a big chunk of my book of business now to the point where it's very minimal, but makes some sense to hold on to it a bit just to have a little bit of steady income. But that allowed me to be, I don't know how, like, to be a little bit more careful with who I chose to work with, I guess you might say. Yeah, it
gave you a few more choices.
Yeah, like I wasn't in a position where I needed to take a deal with a company that was maybe some fly-by-night bait company that's already done and gone sort of deal.
Do you remember that lure? I think Ike promoted it around the time.
The laser lure?
Yeah, the laser lure.
Yeah.
Like you didn't need to like call laser lure or anything.
No, right? And I'm not against like guys. If you if you gotta do that, you go ahead and do that. If if that's what you gotta do to make it.
Yeah, times is rough. Like, and gas prices is rougher.
Yeah, like I'm not like looking down on anyone for doing that stuff.
To be
like,
clear, if anyone wants to, I will throw a laser lure exclusively if you'd like to pay my Opens entry. Like, I ain't throwing nothing else but a laser lure, baby.
Exactly. Like, so you got to do what you got to do. I was lucky to be in the situation I was in where I could work with companies that I maybe was already using their product or had confidence in. And in the long run, I felt like that was going to be easier for me to promote and sell.
You believe in it.
Yeah, because you believe in it. And so I was very lucky from that standpoint. And that all kind of comes back to the job I had prior to qualifying, is it allowed me to do that. So,
you were able to still so Elite Series then, right? So you had a part-time scenario opportunity from your boss that kind of gave you a little bit of financial security going into that to make you feel a little bit better. I guess you only had a month and a half, so was it the type of thing where did you like get going on sponsors that month and a half?
Yeah, pretty much right away.
Get your media kit and resume going, and
talk to some contacts at Basscat to see if they'd be interested in helping me out, because I honestly thought about running that 20 or 19-foot Pantera in the Elites. And they're like, no, you probably should get something different. I was like, okay, well, we'll figure that out. And so got that figured out, and just working, getting your jerseys in order, getting your wrap in order, which now is a little more streamlined at this point in my career. But that fall and winter was pretty chaotic.
I can only imagine.
Cold calling sponsors and trying to develop relationships in a short amount of time, and
which is tough to do.
Yeah, convince people to believe in you and take a chance on you when you've only proven yourself just a little bit, really. And really, what a lot of these companies are looking for from a obviously they want to see that you can promote. And really at that point, I hadn't proven myself there. Sure. And they want to see that you can be consistent and hang around on a national level if that's what you want to do long term. And so I hadn't proven myself there either.
Sure.
So really grateful for the people that, helped me out that year and that continue to help me out now, because it's, definitely a risk on their part too.
For sure. For sure.
I didn't know if I could compete nationally. I really didn't. Like, I qualified, had won that Open, but that was 4 tournaments, and I had no idea if I would last more than 2 years on the Elites. I really didn't. And still to this day, you're still have those doubts every so often. You go through stretches, right?
Sure.
And I think anybody who does it long enough is going to run into a bad stretch, and that could easily be me too.
Right.
So
there's something good about that, though. Like, if you don't think you can lose your job, you're probably not going to work as hard.
I agree.
If you don't think that you can be replaced, right?
Yep, I agree.
And I guess you've proven that you belong, and that to me is something that is really cool to see, just being where I'm from. And I think the cooler thing is that you've let your rod kind of do the talking along the way, the whole way. Sure. And there's a lot of pros or people out there who make a lot of money talking, like, and doing that sort of thing. And I guess I have a lot of respect for you, Bob Downey, is what I'm trying to say. And like that story is just so cool. And I think the not caring aspect is so hard to do. And okay, so now you're on the Elite Series. You figured out you're in. Yeah. There's no waiting list for you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got your wrap figured out, and then now you've got the Bassmaster Elite Series on the horizon, and you fish the Opens, which a lot of pro anglers would say that those are as tough as anything. But walk me through when you got there. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, it's honestly pretty intimidating. Because I'd never fished. I'd fished 1 year in the Opens, so you get a bit of a taste of it, but it's not like I'd fished 2 or 3 or 4 years yet. So I fished in college, which helped me to see other places. Even if I didn't succeed on them, I learned a lot.
Sure.
but I wasn't fishing against the top level guys in those events. So it was intimidating. And day one, it was St. John's River, his first tournament. Day one, I think I weighed in a couple fish. Day two, I zeroed.
Huh.
Totally spun out. 100%. Lost a couple fish. Ran around way too much. Completely spun out. Didn't even walk across the stage day two of my first Elite Series tournament because I didn't catch a scoreable bass. And walking away from that tournament was like, wow, what'd we get ourselves into here?
Sure.
But at the same time, like, okay, we're here. We need to make the most of it. Like, this isn't a time to make excuses. This isn't a time to feel bad for ourselves. Like, you gotta figure it out. Like, you gotta get after it. Otherwise, you're not gonna be here in 2 years. Mm-hmm. So it drove me harder to get better, dial my stuff in better, organize better. Like, I was very fishing around in the Midwest. I think it's getting to be where guys are more versatile today than they were maybe when I grew up fishing in the Midwest.
For sure.
You could pretty much put 8 rods in the boat at the beginning of the year, rig them up, and those 8 rods would stay in the boat most of the year, and you could catch you could do what you need to do in the Midwest with those rods. And you travel across country more, and your versatility has to expand way more than fishing natural lakes. And so I've just kind of prided myself in trying to get better at that. Just really bearing down and not making excuses for myself, I guess.
I love that.
Because I think it's really easy if you have a bad event to blame it on other things that you don't need to be blaming it on.
Besides yourself. Yeah.
So it took me a couple events to kind of get into that mindset, though.
Yeah.
Like, the first one was like, gosh, like, I lost so many fish, and that's why I finished so terribly. It's like, no, everyone loses fish in the tournament. It's the guy that's generating more bites that can afford to lose more fish that's generally doing the best. 'Cause everybody loses fish. Everybody has instances on the water that are out of their control. So you need to buckle down and figure out a way to get better.
Well, I think it's interesting how your first Open was Toledo, and it seemed like it was kind of magical, and then your first Elite Series is a kick in the dick. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's almost like that was supposed to happen too. You know what I mean? Because you had just experienced quite a bit of sunshine and rainbows, so to speak. Like, a lot. Comparatively speaking to what most anglers experience on those at those places. So I feel like we all need that. I need it.
Yep.
We all need it.
100%. You grow in those moments, I think.
I agree.
Whether it's tournament bass fishing or things in life that happen that, aren't great. You grow in those moments most, I think.
Right.
And so, it was necessary. And I think I was putting more pressure on myself all of a sudden, like more eyes are on you.
Naturally.
You've got sponsor partners and their eyes are on you. Although I wouldn't say any of my sponsors ever put a lot of pressure on me, but naturally you feel that way, right?
You want to do well for them. You want
right.
to. I get that. Yep.
Yeah. So you're putting pressure on yourself that way, and it took me a while to make a cut that year. We had the first one, and then the second one got canceled due to high water at Chickamauga. Then we had the Classic. And that was an amazing experience, fishing my first Classic. And then COVID hit. And,
that's right.
And so the year got really messed up from a scheduling standpoint. And I'd fished 2 tournaments, and all of a sudden we're sitting at home twiddling our thumbs, wondering what's going to happen next.
Wondering if you're even going to have another one.
Yeah. So fortunately we got the year finished out, and I think I was mid-50s. had some decent finishes, had a top 10, but also had a handful of bombs too, and kind of a mediocre year, I would say. And but it's a cool experience. I mean, his first year on the elites, and definitely eye-opening, and one of those dream come true deals. But it wasn't like I knocked it out of the park that year, but it was middle of the road finish.
Now, after that year, that rookie season, at that point, were you like, I can do a hell of a lot better at this? Like, I got this? Or was it like, did you have questions after that first year?
You still have questions.
Sure.
I made a top 10 that year, which was a big confidence booster.
For sure.
It was in Gunnersville in the fall. We got to frog and punch mats, and I love doing that here in Minnesota.
Was that the one Coop won?
That was the one Frank Talley won.
Oh, that's
one.
right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kufal won the one on Gunnersville, I think.
2 years later.
Yeah. I think
21?
it was 2 years.
22.
A year or two later. I think it was 21.
That Z-Hog.
It was 21. Yeah. Yeah. So this one was in the fall. We got to punch mats, and Seth and I shared a stretch. He kind of had one stretch. I had one stretch. We were within eyesight of each other the whole time, and we stayed off each other's water, but it was cool because we'd talk to each other every time we passed each other. And
he has respect for you. I could tell when he talked about you, when he and I were talking. He respects you a lot.
Yeah, I like Seth a lot. He's someone I've looked up to, and no ego about him. Obviously, amazing fisherman. Goes about his business, I think, in the right way.
I agree. Yeah.
Him and I actually got paired up on Green Lake in Spicer, Minnesota.
No way.
For a Pro-Am.
Silverados?
No, I did fish the Silverados as a co, though.
So did I, yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. I'm curious what years, but yeah.
Yeah, I fished Silverados as a co. This was an Anglers Elite tournament, which was like a little bit smaller circuit going on around the same time. Sorry, I'm getting off on a sidetrack.
Those are so allowed in this.
Kind of a cool story.
You might as well call this show sidetrack. Like, you're good, dude. That's what we do.
I was 18. He was 22. The only reason I know that is because he was
hungover.
Who knows? Probably not.
He showed up late to one on green. I fished against him because he had a wedding the night before. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, yep.
I was going off to college that late summer, and so I had graduated high school. I was going off to college, but I had jumped into this Pro-Am tournament on green just to get some experience. Really is all it was for. And Andy Young was in that tournament. Seth, I forget some of the other guys, but it was back when green was like pretty good still, right? This would have been 06, I think.
Oh, it was plenty good then.
Yeah, 05, 06.
Glory days.
Yeah. And show up, don't know Seth, and it's a random draw, Pro-Am, so we work together ultimately. But show up, they're like, yeah, Bob, you're going to be with Seth the next day. Oh, cool. Don't really know who he is. He's got the long hair at the time, too.
Sure.
I've got a picture of it still. It's actually pretty cool.
So this is like, did he still have the blue and yellow boat?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Ranger. Yeah, dark carpet. And Seth, it must have been one of those deals where as a co, you could, or even as a pro, you could cherry pick any tournament you want. But Seth had fished the whole series. I had not. I had just fished this one. I wanted to jump into it and fish it. And Seth, like, he was in contention to win AOI that year. So he had spent 3-4 days practicing up there and had it pretty dialed in. And we show up to the first spot, and we're I don't think he'd really care if I told what we were doing, because that's kind of a long time ago. And
was it a wigglewort?
Yeah, exactly.
He told me he said that story on this.
Oh, yeah?
But he didn't mention, I don't know if he mentioned your name, but you guys messed him up on a wigglewort that day?
Well, in the morning we did, but they weren't big.
Sure.
I thought they were big. Like, Seth's catching them, and he's dropping them in the boat. He's like, oh, that's a peanut. Just throw it back. I'm looking at him like, what? Like, we're throwing these back. He's like, yeah, just throw it back. It's like, all right. They're like 3-pounders. It's like,
he knows he needs 3.5, 3 3/4.
Yeah.
That's like the spotted bass. There was a spotted bass deal on green, but it was like 17 to 19 pounds for 5. You know? Yeah.
And so we're throwing him back. He's like, yeah, he's like, he had been there practicing for 4 or 5 days. We pull up on this spot. He leaves it. He's like, yeah, I didn't even practice there. I just had a hunch. It's like, what? Immediately, I'm like, okay, this guy thinks differently than, and he's 22 at the time, pretty young.
Right.
It's like, yeah.
Like fishing shit you didn't practice, that is unique in 2006 for, I feel like, a lot of fishermen.
For a young 22-year-old.
In Minnesota.
That had just practiced 4 days. Yeah. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
So anyways, we run around the lake that day, and we were burning spinner baits the whole day. And
after the wigglewort in the morning thing? Yep. He would not care about that. Yep.
And we caught him pretty good. I think we contributed equally to our bag of, I think it was a 6 or an 8 fish limit.
Sure.
And then at the end of the day, so it's like, I want to hit these stretch of docks. I learned a lot from him that day. It was really cool. We had like some sunny conditions, some cloudy conditions, and he was constantly juking and jiving different spots based on conditions. And so I'm thinking like this whole time, man, like this guy's thinking differently about things. However, I'm still very green, 18 years old, learning a lot, but immediately you could tell like, wow, this guy thinks about things differently. Anyways, we fished this little marina area at the end of the day. He flips a jig under there and sticks like a 4.5 pound largemouth. And we ended up winning the tournament. And so ever since then, this is a long tangent, but ever since then,
you're good. It's a great story.
I followed Seth. And
so
I was pretty young at the time too, and he was as well. And so I had kind of followed him since, that moment, and fished as a I think just for a year in the Silverados. It was one of my college years in the summer, 06 or 7 or 8 or something like that. I think I was paired up with Sean Haig.
No way.
Yeah, one of them on Minnewaska.
That's that's the person who I contacted the first time I wanted to join the Junior Bassmasters.
Really?
Sean Haig, yep. And the first Junior Bassmaster event I ever fished on Grand Lake in Rockville, right over here, was with Sean Haig.
Yeah,
I know Sean very well.
He's in Texas now.
Lives in Texas.
Yeah,
now.
Yeah, that's the same.
Crazy.
One. Yeah. We were paired on Minnewaska. Had a fun day offshore, and then Cody Drazel,
Drazel.
Yep. Drazel.
Good
I was paired
fisherman.
with him on green, and I forget the other guy on Lahamadou that year. But anyways,
Sean, you fished in front of Ballroom, didn't you? Them weed lines out in front of on the Glenwood side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Made his head, because I'm the spawn of Doug Petrock and Sean Haig, and I know.
Oh, really?
Yep. Sean was a lot like Sean fishing that Glenwood area. Doug Petrock fishing like that mid range.
Yeah. We were definitely up near Glenwood.
Yep.
We're fighting. I remember we were fighting waves because he's like, "Hey, come up front," because the bow kept coming out, so we were both standing on front.
You have Skeeter 20i then?
Yeah. He sure did.
Did it start on fire yet?
No.
Okay.
It rode pretty well though.
Oh, nice boat.
I was impressed with the ride.
Yeah, for a Skeeter.
Just
kidding, Skeeter fans.
So that was a cool year. But so Seth fished him as a pro, I believe, and so I kind of followed his career since then through the Opens, and really inspired me. Was one of the reasons I fished the Opens that year too, is just from his success. So
right.
Anyways, that was a long tangent off the Gunnersville deal, but we ended up fishing next to each other at Gunnersville, which is kind of cool.
I want to stay on the tangent for one more so when you watched him, so you did 3 different things on Green Lake during that day, right? And to me, people listening, right, like when you're talking about that extra, like what makes a great angler versus a good angler, or what makes a good angler versus a mediocre angler, right? Mm-hmm. Like they don't just eat a wigglewort all day.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And there's a little bit to those transitions, and I guess being that Green Lake's not the lake it is anymore, and being that you're probably never going to fish a tournament on Green Lake again, neither is Seth. I think this is maybe a really good teaching example, like for me too, even just to so you started throwing a wigglewort in the morning and switched to like burning a spinnerbait. So like walk me through that weather change. Like what was that like?
Yeah, the morning was cloudy, overcast, windy, and the first thing Seth said is, I've noticed these smallmouth relate tighter to the grass in the clouds. And so we were cranking that wigglewort around grass and like ripping it out of the grass in the morning. And I mean, I was 18 at the time, and that must have been impressionable on me because I still remember him saying that. And then once the sun came out, we started running those shallower, I forget what a lot of those flats top out at, if they get up to 6 or if it's like 6 to 12. And then there was like little isolated cabbage clumps on some of them. And then we get on some rock stretches too.
So that's when the sun came out.
Yeah.
Fleetwood Mac would start to play, like Stevie Nicks would start to sing, "You see your gypsy."
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
start to put the trolling motor on like 6.
Yeah, and they start roaming a bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so to me at that time, I was clueless though. Like now it makes sense to me. I understand a little. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at smallmouth, but I do understand kind of a little bit better what they do under sunny and cloudy conditions. And it's still never a guarantee what they're going to do. But yeah.
There's contradictions to it, but yet a lot of generalities to it. The fact that they're tight to cover, probably tighter to an edge when it's cloudy, probably more grounded.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. The only time that trumps that when it's sunny to me is like a boulder pattern where they use like the shady side of a boulder and they're tight there. But other than that, sunny, it's like they're less tight to shit.
Yeah. That's St. Clair this year was like that. A lot of sandgrass on St. Clair, and besides the morning, I was cracking a tube in the morning on a spot and had a group of them and caught a limit, and then I'd just go out in the abyss and scope around. And when that sun came out, like those things just like rise up off the bottom. All of a sudden you could see them. But
start singing gospel music, like just making it happen, baby. Okay.
But when it was cloudy, they were sucked down into that sandgrass and harder to see on live. Well, I was using Mega Live, but when the sun was out, it wasn't like they were getting right up under the surface, but they were out of that sandgrass, and they were, I think what it was is they were all of a sudden up and like moving around and feeding more.
That brings me up another side tangent while we're on this side tangent of side tangents. Like when they're hugging like that and you got live scope going around, and we're going to get into like just the change in evolution you've seen on the Elite series with all of that stuff. But it's interesting to me how probably a lot of people will go around with live scope and they probably don't cast till they see a fish, but yet with how curious those smallmouth are, if you throw the bait and there's no fish, if those fish are hugging, like if you're patient enough to go through that process, you can locate them. But I'm curious how many like fish people.
I think these days more than we used to,
for sure.
Because I think in the past that's just how we'd fish. You know, we were always casting.
That's what we did.
So we were finding those fish or running across them, naturally how we'd normally fish. Nowadays, and I've found myself doing it more this year than any other year. Like you said, you got the rod at your hip and you got your bait in your hand and you're just waiting to cast, right?
That's crazy. Yeah.
So we're probably definitely around that stuff they can hide on. You know, your straight sand bottoms, they have a tough time hiding, but boulders and even bigger rock piles or sandgrass, like, they're hiding in that stuff.
Hard to see, sometimes.
It can be, yeah.
So Gunnersville, you and Seth were fishing on the same stretch.
Yeah, so, it was cool. Like, we just were both punching grass.
Yeah.
We kind of we each had our own little couple 100-yard stretch that we had clearly both found in practice because we both ended up there, but we took note of where each other fished on day one and just respected each other's water, and wherever I fished he didn't go, and wherever he fished I didn't go. And even if we left, like if I left and he left and then I came back, I wasn't, I just stayed off of his stretch.
Yeah, you didn't come back and find him on your stretch.
Right. Never. No.
He's old school like that, I feel like. And granted, I'll be the first to admit that when I fished the Big Bass Bonanzas against Seth, I do think he cut me off a little tight. However, like, I do think there's that old school blood in him, like where if there's territory that's kind of claimed, he's respectful.
Yeah. And I appreciate that.
I didn't
about
claim
him.
shit. So, like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, I've always respected him, and that was a cool experience, and that was my first top 10, and kind of gave me some confidence going into year 2. It was near the end. I went into the last tournament of that year inside the Classic cut. I think I was in like 38th my rookie year. That's going into Fork, and then fell out of it at Fork. And that was another moment where I'll admit I cried on the way home. It's like one of those moments where you want it so bad and it doesn't happen, and
you just experienced the Classic and then you had to miss it.
Yeah, so it hurt to fall out, and then I missed it my second year too. Actually had almost what I would say a tougher second year. Still made
sophomore slump, if you will, like this.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I think I still finished in the 50s in AOI, middle of the pack, but had 3 bombs and a couple of high finishes, but more bombs than you'd like to have.
For sure.
And going into the last event was another one of those moments I kind of alluded to earlier, where if I didn't make the cut, the 50 cut, I was probably going to be very close to getting cut from the elites. The way they were doing.
How does that work? Yeah.
Well, the first couple of years, it was different than how they do it now. It was more of a career average for the entire field, no matter where you finished in AOI that year. You were judged on your career average.
Well, if you only have 2 years, that's really...
So it's tough,
you're judged
right?
Much worse than a guy who's been there
for
10 years and maybe had 2 of those same years, right?
Yeah.
Maybe his first 2 years were that way, and his next 8 were pretty decent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude,
so
that's
it was tough the first couple years, and now they've made changes due to angler vote. We've gone back to the way they used to always do it.
Okay.
But for whatever reason, after the league split, they went to that system where no matter where you finished in AOI, everyone was judged off of their career AOI finish.
Which is weird because they lost most of their field.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, why does that not make sense to me right now? Like,
I think what they were trying to do is they took a lot of guys way down the standings in the Opens to make a full field in 2019 or 2018, excuse me.
The year before you made it. Yeah. Because Josh qualified the year before, right?
No, Josh qualified in 2021.
Okay. After, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
But the split happened in 18, right?
Yeah, so the first year...
That's when they took the extras.
Yeah.
Got it. Sorry.
So they had
slow.
Yeah, that's all good. And I think they're just trying to trim out a lot of the, the guys that just they felt like maybe weren't going to make it for 3, 4, 5 years.
Well, you had a lot of career, I don't want to call them career politicians because they're the past and the history of our sports, so it's really hard to say it like that, right? But you had people who had done really well in the past that were kind of riding that, so to speak, right?
Yeah. But I wish it had always been like it is now, and I'll explain how it is now. But at the time, that's just how they did it, and it made it pretty tough. You had to have a pretty high career average to not get cut, and it. My career average was mid-50s at the time. And you'd think, that would be enough to allow you to hang around. And it did, but not by much.
Sure.
So now the way they do it is top 70 in AOI are good for the next year.
Sure.
No matter what your career average is. Top 70 in AOI qualify for the next year. And then anyone below that is judged off of their career average. And then the bottom 10 of that 30 are the ones that
are for sure
get cut. Yeah. And there's some gymnastics in there. Like if you fish for 5 years, you drop your worst AOI finish. If you fish for 10 years, you drop your 2 worst AOI finishes. So there's some stuff that rewards veterans of the sport,
And
it should.
Yep, I'm all about that.
A little bit of tenureship, if you might call it that.
Yep.
So there's some of that, and that's good. I think that allows a guy that's been doing it for 8-10 years to have a bad year or two, which you're going to have. Like, you do this long enough, you're going to have some bad years, but not get cut. So,
well, do they cut the same amount of spots every year, or do they cut a different amount of spots every year? Because they can only let so many people in, which means they can only cut so many people out, right?
Yeah, at this point, we're cutting 10 and bringing in 10.
Okay.
Each year. Yeah.
And you like that?
I think that's a good system right now.
Yep.
That's assuming everyone in the Opens accepts their invitation, which nowadays it seems like everybody is. That wasn't always the case.
It wasn't.
But nowadays it seems to be. So, yeah, that's a system we're on. I think it's fair. I think if you're in top 70 in AOY, I think it's fair that you requalify for the next year. And
what if you take 69th in AOY 3 years in a row?
Yeah, you're still in. So there's some. I understand what you're saying. I'm not saying
they shouldn't be in.
Yeah.
I don't know anything, Bob Downey. I've never fished the Elite Series, baby.
Yeah.
Never.
I think I would say it's fair for the most part. There's always going to be a couple guys on that bubble that, on the bubble on the inside and on the bubble on the outside where it might not be, 100% fair, right? But, for example, I don't mean to throw out names, but this is just an example. I really like the guy, but like a Matty Wong, for example, right?
Sure.
Love Matty Wong. Awesome dude.
What's not to like about Matty Wong? And I don't think you're throwing shade by stating
amazing
facts
dude.
Of the game here.
Amazing dude. Had a really good finish to his Elite Series season this year.
He did.
Fished his way inside the top 70.
Yeah.
If he would have finished 71st, he would have been cut.
Man.
But finished, 69th, 68th. So props to him, right?
Right.
And then on the flip side, you've got a guy like Brad Watley who finished below the top 70, who's made some classics, has had an okay career, but he's going to be one of those first guys to get cut.
Hey guys, Ross, owner here at Waypoint Angler Supply. We're super excited to have opened a premier fishing store here right on the shores of Lake Minnetonka. I've fished here all my life, fished a bunch of the local tournaments, and just totally fell in love with this lake in particular. It's always been a dream of mine to have a tackle store on the lake, and we're super lucky to be on Lake Minnetonka here. We've got certain offerings here that you really can't find anywhere else in the state, and a lot of it you can't find nationally. We hope you're as excited as we are that we're going to be offering boat ramp delivery right here on the lake to Spring Park, Maxwell, and North Arm ramps. To order tackle for boat ramp delivery, all you have to do is give us a call here at the store or head to our website, and we're going to meet you at one of our 3 meeting points. Swing on into the shop here on Lake Minnetonka. Come see us. We love to talk fishing. We love to get feedback. We'll do anything we can so that you guys can have the most success out on the water.
Use the code GALAXY20 to save 20% on your next tackle binge. World champion barbecue born in the pits of Memphis, Tennessee, family owned and located just north here in Minnesota. Just north of Memphis Barbecue, ladies and gentlemen. One look at their trophy room and one taste of their barbecue is all it takes to know it's the very best. But the J&O story runs much deeper than that, and bringing people together, whether it's friends, family, or fishing buddies, with some mouth-watering smoked barbecue, that's what they're all about, which is about as American as it gets. If you smoke meat, if you like to grill meat, if you like to cook meat, you need to try the J&O Memphis Dry Rub Seasoning, which will enhance your barbecue game instantaneously. Also, voted world's best sauce in 2022. You can bring this right to your kitchen table. They've got 3 flavors, and each one is better than anything you'll find in the supermarket. Let's take things up a notch this summer. You can order their dry rub and world famous barbecue sauce right on their website. Visit jnomemphis.com. That's jnomemphis.com. Or visit their Facebook page for food truck locations and schedule. Barbecue.
I'm Johnny B with Just North of Memphis Barbecue, and I approve this message.
Have they announced who's cut yet?
I shouldn't say he's going to get cut because there could be some guys that retire.
I don't think you did say he was going to get cut. I think, but anyway, yep.
He's on that chopping block, assuming no one retires early, that sort of deal, which sometimes you could have some guys retire early. But they're...
Well, I mean, how many more years can Rick Clunn keep doing it?
Yeah,
how many
or
more years?
Fritz
or
or
Fritz,
something like that.
Or Larry Nixon.
Yeah.
You had Larry Nixon fishing this year, too.
Yeah, so I'd say for the most part it's fair. You're always going to have a few of those on the bubble, one way or the other, who might think it's unfair. But at some point, there's got to be a line, and that's just that's kind of the sad but necessary part of the Elite Series.
Well, Bob, and I feel like I just did some Miracle references the last podcast, but you've seen Miracle, the movie Miracle, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's one of my favorite movies.
You know Coxie, right?
Coxie?
Yeah, like the guy at the last cut.
Oh, okay.
Before the Olympic team, right?
I remember
the
like some of the
guy.
Yes. Okay, I do.
Yeah. The one in the previews who's like, isn't it obvious for the girls?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. I'm with you.
And I remember Jack O'Callahan.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to win a national championship. That pansy over there cheap shots me, steals the ring right out my finger. How about you, Coxie? But Coxie was the last cut on that team, and it was like, it's not that he wasn't good enough. It's there's somebody who needs to get cut. So somebody on that line, somebody's feelings and heart's going to get broken, and maybe did or didn't deserve it because this guy did or didn't retire. But there's a lot of tough decisions in that world, and they need to be made. You can't make.
Yeah.
You make an exception for one guy, and then all of a sudden there's no rules at all.
Yep. Yeah, you're dead on. It's a tough part of what we do, because a lot of those, there's usually a good buddy or two that you got to say goodbye to at the end of the year, and that's hard. I mean, because we're all going through it. We all can relate to each other. We know what it's like on the road, and so it's definitely one of the hardest parts of our career, whether it's ourselves, like me, that was potentially going to get cut, or you see a good buddy, or you're striving not to get cut. It's just kind of the reality that I don't think most people think of when they're trying to strive to be on the Elite Series. They don't think about that part.
Not at all. Yeah.
You think about getting there, and then when you get there, you're like, here's what I got to do to stay here, sort of thing. So,
well, it seems like easy, right? Once you get there.
Yeah.
Oh, I just have to not be the.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah.
But we all know the talent that's up there, and that 80th place in points guy is a fucking hammer.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So that's the hard thing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's competitive. I mean, as it should be, though. That's what makes the Elite Series what it is, and that's what makes it a top-tier league in the country. So it needs to be that way. It's just kind of the harsh reality, but it's no different in anything else, whether it's the NHL or you're working at a bank. If you're not, it
is different though, Bob.
It's a little different.
It is different because if you take 60th in points, like you didn't make any money, and you know what I mean. Like it's not like NHL where you get cut, but you were guaranteed.
Yeah, the
$2 million or whatever the hell.
The money side 100% is different.
That's what I don't understand, Bob. Like, why aren't we there yet? You know what I mean? Like, what's holding us back from getting to that standpoint? Because to me, you guys getting there and staying there is a hell of an accomplishment, and you're the best of the best that this world has to offer with bass fishing. And if it were hockey, you'd be making millions right now. Yeah, that part is. Yeah, I definitely agree that the money side's different for sure. I'm not saying it should be like hockey, but I'm saying like
Yeah.
I don't know if it should be as difficult for you guys as it is, but I'm not saying that like anybody's out to get you. It's just the way it's gone about, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a valid question. That's one I've asked myself too since qualifying, and it's not an easy road once you get there from that standpoint. I don't know if non-endemic money needs to be in it more than it is. And what I mean by that is like your non-fishing related companies is probably where a lot of that is going to come from. If
That's
we're
where
talking
it came from when it was good, right?
Yeah.
FLW or when Jacobs, Walmart,
right.
Land O'Lakes, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
Fujifilm.
that's where it comes from. I think the fishing industry does the best that they can, I think, based on their size. But to really pump money into it, it probably needs to be non-endemic. And part of that's on us as anglers, though, too. Like, part of that's our job to attract those companies and try and get them involved in the sport, and not just try and rely on the leagues to bring them in from whatever it might be, a tournament payout standpoint or an AOI payout standpoint. As anglers, we run our own small businesses too, so part of that might be on us to, start pounding doors and cold calling and getting them involved on a personal business level too, not just from a tournament organization level. I think it could grow in both ways though. Like the angler,
there's a hustler's aspect to it that you can. I mean, look at Gerald Swindle.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
What a career that guy has built
from
hustling and making it happen on the business side.
Yeah.
And staying where he needs to be on the fishing side. But the weird thing to me, Bob, is like, how many kids want to be professional hockey players? A lot.
Yeah.
And now with high school fishing, how many kids
Yeah.
want to be professional fishermen? It used to be the fact of like the fishermen wanted to do it bad enough where you didn't have to pay them enough like to do it, right?
Sure.
And
yeah,
like I feel like hockey's the same way though. Like, but is it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a weird thought, but I don't know how you fix it. There's no answer. Like you start drafting fishermen, you start like going that model, and it doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah, it's
how's golf work? Like,
it's all like not. I think a lot of it's just your non-endemic partners and sponsors that are involved in the sport, and it's eyeballs on the sport, charging admission to watch a golf tournament. People go to the classic weigh-ins for free. There's no charge for any of that. You can go to a weigh-in for free. We don't have spectators like golf and NHL and MLB where they pay a fee to go watch a game. Like that's a
really good point.
Like that's a big revenue driver, and we don't have that in fishing. And we could. Maybe you charge $5 to go watch a classic weigh-in. I don't know. But those are ideas.
If you're there, you're going to probably pay $5 to not turn around.
I would think so. So there's stuff like that. The viewership, golf versus fishing on FS1. Those non-endemics are, if you got 1 million eyeballs on the PGA Championship, IBM's going to dump in more money for a commercial there than they are for Bassmaster on FS1. Not saying like that FS1 contract's a big deal. I think that helped attract like a progressive for AOI payout and title sponsor and that sort of deal. But like that's probably where it, in my eyes, where it would come from a non-endemic level.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're not there yet. And I think our sport is still looked at as a little bit of like a, I don't know. I think, at times, like
that's what it is on TV. I mean,
like,
need one?
Sure. I think at times it can be like that. And I'm not saying that it needs to be perfectly clean, cut and dry and no personalities, because I think that's what drives eyeballs too.
Mr. Gilmore, I'm your caddy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I'm not saying that guys need to be, uber. Obviously, you got to be professional to an extent, right? but you also got to have personality and, provide some laughs and provide some entertainment that provides eyeballs, allows people to want to watch the sport too. So
you made me think about, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there's just, I guess there's maybe a fine line there is what I'm trying to say.
There is. And I think the fact that it's so sponsor driven, like I was just thinking, you made me think about like UFC fighting.
Yeah.
Like, how big of a savage like Conor McGregor is. Like,
yeah,
he's an Irishman who stands in Ireland and says, I don't give a flying fuck. I'm going to kick this guy's fucking ass. Like, and everybody's like, ah.
Yeah.
And he's allowed to do that. And I can't say the same about any pro bass fisherman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think being yourself is a big deal. Like,
but that's hard to do when you have like,
it is.
When your whole salary is based on the image of companies.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like myself, I'm saying almost in the opposite way. Like myself, I'm not a Matt Robertson, right?
Bob Downey, I know you're not a Matt Robertson.
and
that's okay.
And so for me to fake it to be a Matt Robertson, that's also like a turnoff in the same way as almost a Matt Robertson.
Well, then you're Fletcher Shyrock. Yeah. Just kidding. Fuck, I feel like we might need to cut that. I don't care. Fuck it. I didn't mean it. He's probably a cool dude.
But I mean, it goes both ways. Like, you can't have a Matt try and be some clean-cut, perfect professional either, because then he's not being himself.
Totally.
So you got to have, like, Matt walks the line at times, but I also think he's really good for the sport at times too.
Right.
And so you got to have it both ways. You can't have some guy like myself trying to be a Matt, because I'm not a Matt. But
allowing an environment for people to be themselves without losing their careers, or like, to me, I think the Matt Robertson has brought a lot of good to the sport.
Yeah.
In the sense of like,
I agree.
I feel like you guys had to all look and act kind of the same, and like there was this kind of barrier of like what you could act like, and what you like, you almost had to really put on a suit and tie or whatever, so to speak.
Yeah. So there's this fine line there a bit where you want to bring out that person's personality, because that's what
it's about.
That's what it's about.
It's what people connect with. That's what people connect with people. Right.
And so I think it also takes the right company to also want to be a part of that too. Right. So whatever company that is.
You and Ugly Stick don't seem like the best fit.
But like Downey. Ugly Stick and Matt, that's like a match made in heaven.
Oh,
right?
it is.
And so that's perfect for Matt's brand.
Right.
And Matt's really good at that. I think most people probably don't realize how smart Matt is with a lot of that stuff.
Genius.
Yeah.
But like, to me, you can't have Tommy Boy without Chris Farley, but you also can't have Tommy Boy without David Spade. You know what I mean? So you need both sides of the puzzle, and a lot of times you and Matt Robertson on a show together, to me, is like the perfect.
Yeah, it might be
the perfect mix of like business and strip clubs, or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know where I was going with all that, but
me either.
Basically, I think we've got a lot of room to grow in this sport, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And how you go about doing that. They've scratched the surface. I think they're always trying new things, which is good. But I think we got a long ways to go. But at the same time, like, I'm pretty happy doing what I'm doing, and I feel really lucky. So it's hard for me to complain about that stuff too.
I didn't see it as that. To me, it's just your analysis based on your experience with the sport, and with how humble and grateful you are as a person. I didn't take it that way whatsoever. But do you think our resources can handle the growth? I guess there's a lot of, I'm not one to ride the hype train or controversies or trends, but there's a lot of talk right now and controversy about, FFS, if you will. But I guess the greater question about the sport growing is a matter of, like, there's people who say our resources are taking a toll, and there's people who are saying that fish are adapting.
Yeah.
And that's like the big hot button right now. But
yeah, I think fish are definitely getting harder to catch in certain situations.
Sure.
You can still go to lakes that don't get a lot of pressure and they fish pretty normal, and those fish are pretty willing to bite. Or you're even on pressured fisheries in the right window of time, and those fish are going to fire and you're going to catch them pretty good.
yeah,
You're still going to have that. But I think in general, fish seem to be getting harder to catch a little bit. Anyways, I feel like I've noticed.
I agree.
And
with
I don't
that.
know if we are thinking that because in a lot of cases we can see these fish
All
now.
of a sudden we know how hard they are to catch.
Yeah, whereas
Right,
before we show up to that spot, make a couple casts, don't get bit, must not be here.
Right.
Right?
Instead of they're here but they're hard to catch.
Yeah.
They're not here versus they're
Yeah.
here and hard to catch.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that runs through my head too, where now I know they're there and they're not biting, whereas in the past I'd throw 10 casts, not get bit, and just think they're not even there.
Right.
It's not that they're getting hard to catch. I just didn't know they were there.
Right.
So I don't know. It might be a couple years until I really can hash that out, I guess. But I do think in general they are. But at the same time, our tournament weights are not really getting much worse.
No.
Like, if
I don't know if they're
anything-
dropping off worse, but the winning weights are the same or better.
Yeah.
Like it seems like.
At least smallmouth tournaments on tour anyways. I can't really speak to locally. I haven't fished local tournaments in Minnesota for a few years now. Like I've heard, Tonka's a lot tougher than it was, and I've experienced that. I've been out there a little bit in the last couple of years.
It's fishing like Gunnersville now.
Yeah, like it's
minus the 8-pounders.
Yeah, so I've heard rumors of that type of stuff, but our smallmouth events on tour, the weights are going up. So, and I think that's a factor of forward facing 100%.
Well, and you think about a Great Lake system and how many fish are in a Great Lake system and the general sample size, and
yeah,
there's a lot more to exploit with that, I feel like, too.
Yeah, and they're protected in a way, with wind and
for sure.
Time of year. You can only fish for them for so many months out of the year.
Yeah.
But those southern fisheries, those southern largemouth fisheries, they seem like they're harder to get to bite. At times, I mean, there's still windows where you can catch them pretty good, but
I've seen it's super bite. Like it seems like pressure just turns that bite window into more of a factor.
Yeah.
I've noticed it up here, but especially down south on Hartwell.
yeah,
It seems like unless you have weather, it's
Mm-hmm.
a very bite window oriented deal. And I broke the seal earlier, so I have to pee again, but I've noticed that.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Jury's maybe still out on a lot of that stuff.
Well, fish adapt, so it's a matter of how much better are they at adapting than we are at catching them, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That's what it boils down to.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what makes fishing fun too.
It's like a semi-peaceful war, if you will.
yeah. Yep.
And when you got to the Elite Series, I feel like it was a little different Elite Series than the Elite Series now, and it hasn't even been that much time. So I was gonna
Yeah.
what's that been like? And I guess probably when you got there, you were probably the most scared of probably a different guy than you're most scared of this year. You know what I mean? Which
100%.
is wild. That's not how it used to be. It used to be you're scared of Kevin Van Dam, you're scared of Kevin Van Dam, and you're scared of Kevin Van Dam, and you're scared of Kevin Van Dam
Yeah.
for your whole fishing career, and
Yeah.
that's who you're scared of. And
Yeah.
now
Now I'm scared of Koyo
Yeah.
Fujita,
yeah, dude.
the fajita that has made 5 top 10s in his rookie year.
I'm not even fishing the Elite Series, and that's who I'm scared of, dude. Holy shit. That dude doesn't even,
Yeah.
we fish lakes in Minnesota, and it's these Highland reservoirs are crazy. This guy hadn't even fished in the U.S.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so it's guys like that are so dialed in to forward-facing sonar right now. And I say that, I'm not saying that jokingly. I'm halfway serious about that. I don't think forward-facing is the end-all, be-all I think next year our schedule is really going to lend itself to it. So I think next year is like, oh baby, you better be pretty good with it. Whereas this year,
place your bets on Koyo Fujita for AOI, like now or later.
Yeah, he's gonna be hard to handle next year with it. This year, through the first 6 events, you didn't really have to use it if you didn't want to.
Right.
And you could survive. There were tournaments won on it throughout those first 6 events, but you could.
All of them were.
A lot of them. Yeah, I mean, Okeechobee, Seminole, Santee. Murray, not so much. That was like the only one, I would say.
It's a little spawning deal going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't. Lake, not so much. Although I used it in Lay for all my fish. I was Demiki rigging spots for the most part, which is the last thing I thought I'd be doing on Lay. So I played for some guys there, but the last 3, obviously, it was, that's what you kind of need to be doing. The St. Lawrence, if you're in the river, you use it some. You don't really need it. It's nice to have, sort of thing.
But from what it sounds of it,
but in the lake, it's the deal.
From what I've heard, like if you're fishing in the river, you're basically punting.
Yeah, I fished in the river this year because I knew I needed to make a cut to make the Classic.
Sure.
So I stayed in the river. I was in that spot in the points. I think I was in the 30s going into St. Lawrence. And this was my 4th time there. And I'd pretty much spent each of the 3 years prior in the river. So I knew the river the best.
Sure. That makes sense.
But you're 100% right. You're not fishing the river to win. You can make a cut doing it. I was in 2nd place last year going into day 4 and I fished the river. So you can have a top 10. I don't know even if I would have been able to fish effectively all day on day 4 last year, I still don't think I would have won that tournament. Jay would have had to fall off somehow. But so fishing the river on the St. Lawrence is next year. It'll play more because we're going out of Waddington, which is 80 miles from the mouth of the lake. But it will probably still be one on the lake, if guys can run there each day.
It's a wild like scenario, but
yeah. So, but yeah, it's definitely playing. And guys like Koyo and Taku and Patrick Walters, those guys that are good with it are, it's weird, man. Like how do you use it so much now? You think I'll just sit and think like, why can't you just go fishing without it and compete anymore?
Right.
You can. In some certain scenarios you can, and you can win without it still. But it's like I part of it I think I've concluded is that you can target bigger fish more effectively with it.
Yeah. Sure.
I think we've seen that with the smallmouth tournaments. Our weights are up right now. We're able to throw more accurately and more efficiently at fish than we ever have in the past.
It's one of those scenarios where a big fish is easier to see than a small fish all of a sudden on that deal, right? Which is like...
Right.
It's a weird concept to think about.
Yeah. So it's changing fast. Techniques are evolving all of a sudden in front of our eyes faster than they ever have. In, like you said, a 2, 3, 4 year period. When I qualified in 2019, I had 4 Trex on my boat and a 9-inch graph at the bow and a 9-inch at the driver's seat. Side imaging, no 360, no
this
forward.
This is 2019, baby.
Yeah,
like,
not that long
what?
ago. Not that long ago.
Are we in the Twilight Zone, Bob Downey? Jeepers.
So things are changing really fast right now. And, man, like companies are changing the way they design product because of this thing.
Yeah.
Hard baits are not, outside of a jerk bait, are not selling as well as plastics right now because of it. So a lot is changing in the industry because of it. Whether you like it or not, I mean, it's evolving. And I'm not really like a hater of it. I'm not a lover of it. I think I kind of alluded to the generation I grew up in. I grew up without electronics, and I like fishing that way. but I'm also young enough where, I've had a cell phone since high school, so it's not like technology has completely avoided me all of my life. I've kind of split halfway, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
I think your 30 and unders, especially your 25s and unders, are like fully engrossed in it and have been most of their life. Your 40 and olders, that hasn't been a big part of their life until now. They're having, especially from a fishing standpoint anyways, they're having to really learn it. And some have fully embraced it and they're really good with it. But there's a lot of the guys that are not necessarily like totally hating on it, but 1 foot in, 1 foot out, don't really love to do this. I'll put in some time with it, but don't really want to learn it. And I think that's where you're seeing some of these guys struggle right now. I think they'll be fine. I think some of these guys will put in the time and they'll learn it and they'll be competitive on the elites with it. But this year, for whatever reason, was a big eye-opener with it from that standpoint.
It was for me, even just locally here. And I was saying this to Tim Schroeder and Walker when they were on last episode, but like I think about like a big monumental change in my career was side imaging and learning side imaging. And because I dedicated so much time to learning that tool, it advanced me like in my tournament results and all of that. And I think about like live scope, I was kind of that 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of guy. And I'm not saying that I'm 2 feet in all the time, but
yeah,
I wasn't 2 feet in enough to understand when to use it and be super confident with it and to know when I could run with it versus, put it away and not feel like I had to look at it or what have you. And getting humbled this year on the tournament trails was really tough, but it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because the last 2 or 3 months, I feel like I'm learning my side imaging unit again, but it's a new thing. And because it's like when you got to the St. Johns River for the first time, it threw wood on your fire and poured gas on top of it. And what happened the next time you went to the St. Johns River, Bob Downey? You got second. You almost won that bastard.
Yeah, almost won it.
Yeah, dude, you almost won an elite series. Because and to me, these guys who maybe are anti-forward facing sonar, I understand why.
Yeah,
but
me too.
And I also understand that if you're like me, sometimes you need to feel the suffering of not understanding your forward facing sonar or understand the suffering of a level that you haven't played in before to understand what it's going to take for you to get there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%.
Like if you've been winning tournaments, flipping a jig on targets that you can see with your eyes and like all of a sudden you don't, it's like, what the fuck? But if it keeps happening, then it's a matter of like, it's like if you're in marketing, if you work in marketing and all of a sudden like you've got this really awesome marketing strategy for Facebook, but then Instagram comes out.
Yeah.
Well, are you going to bitch about Instagram or are you going to figure out how to market on Instagram? You know what I mean? To keep your marketing position or as a marketing head. And to me, it's the same thing with what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's very similar. I'd say I've gotten more familiar with it this year than any other year. I run Mega Live and that was part of it too. I didn't have it my first 2 years on tour.
Right.
I've had it the last 2 now. And I put a lot of time in this summer with it, trying to find bites around the house for smallmouth that were going to be similar to what we were finding on tour, like on Champlain and the suspended stuff and that sort of deal. I worked at that a lot this summer.
Were you able to make it happen?
Around here?
Yeah.
A little bit in Minnesota.
Yep.
Yeah.
Seems like it depends on the lake a little bit as to how much you can do.
Very much depending on the lake. Yeah. Certain lakes set up better for it than others. Type of bait fish that they have and type of structure that lake has. Some smallmouth lakes in Minnesota are your more grassy lakes, and they'll do it a little bit in those depending on the lake and what the bait fish is. But some of the more your traditional clear water or smallmouth lakes. It seems to be more prevalent, and it's not like an everyday thing. I found you can't go out there and expect it to be a thing every day either. It's like certain days, certain conditions, it seems to set up better than others. But it was fun. It's fun unlocking that stuff. It's a totally different world than anything I've done for smallmouth fishing. And I knew it was going to be a thing on Champlain. The MLF Invitational was out there the year before, and there was hints and glimpses of video coverage of that stuff going on. And I kind of always knew that alewives were in Champlain, and we kind of always knew the smallmouth were doing that, but we couldn't target them as effectively as we had been this year. Mm-hmm. But anyways, so I put in a lot of time with it. I still think it comes down to finding your own style with it.
Sure.
Not only, you look at a John Cox, for example, refuses to put it on his boat, still makes a classic perennially. Guys can do it and do well without it. You got, I think this year, though, was maybe the first year we saw where some guys tried to walk that line that maybe didn't have the success they would like to have. But
it's fighting it. They've been fighting it, and it's been working out with them not adopting for however many years it was out. And then this was kind of a turning point year is what you're saying, right? Where it was like,
for whatever reason, it seemed to be,
And by no fault of those guys, they had just had success walking that line last year, the year before that.
Yeah, and I think a big part of having success locally, regionally, nationally is doing your own thing and staying true to your own style of fishing and not trying to be someone else and do that, stick to, what you have most confidence in. Obviously, be open-minded enough to try new things and, experiment with things.
Yep.
But you also got to find confidence in your own style too. And so there's a really fine line, whether that's big picture fishing style in general or more niche, like forward-facing sonar style. Like, am I all in on this? Am I a guy that uses it when it's necessary and that's it? Or am I a guy that's going to not even put it on my boat and just roll with it that way? So there's I don't know. It's
a mind fuck to me.
Yeah, it is. I think because it can slow you down too.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're not as I am definitely not as good with it as most guys.
There's Central Time, there's Eastern Time, there's Pacific Time, Mountain Time, and then there's Live Scope Time, which moves at 5 times more rapid a pace. It feels like.
Yes. And so Lake Fork in 2022, not the year Patrick won, last year, 2022 was a good example of that. I was flipping standing timber in 4 to 10 feet of water with a big worm.
Sure.
Visually fishing, going down, picking it apart, much like I'd pick apart a shallow bank full of wood, but it was more offshore stuff.
Sure.
Not using forward facing, covering a bunch of water throughout the course of the day.
Sure.
There are other guys doing that same exact pattern, but they were using forward facing on each standing piece of timber and spending, let's say, 3 minutes on one chunk of wood where I was spending 20 seconds. We might have had similar finishes because throughout the course,
Luke Palmer scenario, and
covering less water more effectively.
Yep.
I was covering more water, so the odds of me running into more fish were better. But in turn, I was probably leaving fish behind that those guys were picking off. Does that make sense?
100%. That's we've always battled that, right? That's always been a battle.
Different styles.
Yep.
They're using forward facing more than I was, but our finishes were maybe equal. Carl Jacobson and I were doing that similar pattern. I know Carl was picking apart each piece of cover, and I was moving along faster. We had similar finishes. So it's same thing if you were fishing docks, for example, deeper docks, I might be able to cover 200 docks in a day if I'm not slowed down by forward facing.
Sure.
He's fishing 80 docks in a day. We might be catching the same amount of fish.
Yeah. I'm the 80 docks a day guy.
Yeah.
And I always have been. And
Okay.
I've always, without forward facing.
Without forward facing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can relate with that on a big note because like Kyle Shuda's a guy who's the opposite of me.
Yeah.
100%. And it's not that I'm this super slow fisherman.
Yeah. You're more thorough.
But I'm thorough. Like, I
Yeah.
don't like to leave them. I'm not this guy who will flip at every lily pad on a pad field, right? But
Yeah.
I won't. My trolling motor will be on 2 or 3
Yeah.
or what have you. I'm
Yeah.
not KVD, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
No duh. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know what you mean.
But like a guy throwing a spinnerbait down a bank versus a jig, like
Yeah.
that to me is a guy now not using sonar versus using sonar like that.
Exactly.
Your spinnerbait's now a jig when you're using forward facing or what have you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that too to consider with the forward facing is, and those are instances where you might be able to turn it off and your style is to just simply cover more water than the guy using it, and you're going to run into more biters throughout the day where that guy's maybe forcing some into biting
Sure.
more than the guy covering more water. So there's kind of I wrestle with that a little bit too. Like,
Right.
so is it necessary for me to use it in those scenarios? Maybe not. If I can cover more water and run into more active fish than the guy using it, you might come out equal at the end of the day. And in some tournaments, I've seen that be the case. I think there's other situations, i.e. a Luke Palmer on Santee Cooper, who won using it by slowing down, picking stuff apart faster than the guy that wasn't using it.
Right. Right.
So,
But like, so live scope, it's often talked about as he's looking at those trees and looking at fish. But to me, there is a play to be made with that speed game and just flashing it quick to make sure you're making the right cast.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
to maybe see a little subtlety that you didn't see out ahead of you. Or
Yeah.
like, oh, one of those trees is falling over right where my trolling motor's about to go over. And I've been using it a lot with just grass and
Yeah.
just making sure it's clumpy stuff here and then it turns into a hard line here. And no matter where my boat is, I can find the spot where the clumpy stuff meets the hard stuff and I can hit it every single cast, right? And that to me takes way less time than if you were to just fish that area.
yep. Yeah.
So it's a structure fishing tool, but yet if you start to look at fish and you start to just pick that screen apart,
Yeah.
you ain't going to speed up.
No. Yeah. And so that, in my eyes, is that's how you're finding your style of using it, right? Like, it sounds like you're kind of coming into your own of finding your style of how it works best for you. And everyone seems to use it a little differently, but how you're using it is a big way of how I use it too. Like, especially in conjunction with 360.
Yeah, babe. Like,
Right.
you've got a protractor both directions. Like,
Yeah.
you not only know where the weed clump is this way,
Yeah.
but you know how tall this one is compared to this one.
Yeah.
And how much thicker this one is compared to this one.
Yeah.
And you can throw at it within 2 seconds of seeing it or what have you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's cool. It's a cool piece of technology. It's changing things rapidly. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy over it. Like I said, I'm not a hater of it. I'm not a lover of it. I use it as a tool, and I feel like at this point in the game, it's making me a better fisherman. I feel like I don't know if it was on this podcast or a different one.
Willie talking about how he learns quicker with it.
Was it the puzzle deal? Someone was saying someone compared it to now when let's say you're trying to solve a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Pre-forward facing, we were trying to solve a puzzle without the picture. Now we're solving the puzzle with the picture to see how to solve it.
I don't think that was this podcast, but we kind of inadvertently said
We're
that.
saying that.
Where it's a matter, Willie was saying on the Waypoint one, where it's a matter of he learns more every day out fishing.
Yeah.
Because he can see, it's not the fact that there wasn't fish there.
Yeah.
It's that there's fish there and they're not biting right now either because I'm throwing the wrong cricket, I'm throwing the right cricket the wrong way, or the weather is not correct for me to be fishing here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, we didn't know that necessarily before forward-facing sonar. We didn't, at least the cricket part.
Yeah.
We maybe knew the weather wasn't right for what we wanted to do, but we didn't know they were still there.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, you learn a lot from it.
Well, dude, you've gone into like, it's almost like that Open series prepared you a lot for kind of like unexpectedly prepared you for the elites, because you almost put yourself in the position of like, I'm not preparing myself for this. Like, right? I'm
Had
not
to evolve
I don't
quickly.
have these preconceived notions about
Sure.
what this is supposed to look like. I am literally opening myself to an opportunity,
Yeah.
and I'm going to give it 110%, but I'm going to stay open to this opportunity and see what the hell happens. And then what the hell happened, it's like, just keep doing that, Bob Downey, and see what happens, right? And now you've got, I'm just going to open myself up to these opportunities. Now I have this sonar, now I have 360.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give it 110%, and I'm going to see what the hell happens. And now you've qualified for 2 classics. I mean, and to me, I think you deserve a lot of credit for what you've accomplished, and you might feel some guilt. And I can relate with like feeling a lot of guilt with certain things in life that maybe don't make sense or things like that. And I think that's a natural thing for, I guess, guys like you and me.
Yeah, I think, I just feel for the guys that are, because I know those stories, right? I know the stories of the other guys that are trying their hardest to get to that level, and for whatever reason, the stars haven't aligned yet. So I think that's why maybe you feel that way a little bit. But yeah, no, it's been fun. I'm living my dream at this point, and it's cool. The cool part of where we're at in terms of this thing evolving so fast is that's how fishing kind of always has been. And what to me makes it so interesting is no matter how long you do this, you never know everything.
Right.
And so there's always something new to learn, new techniques, new technology. And that's really what makes this sport so cool for me, is you never have it fully figured out. And as soon as you think you do, you get humbled pretty quick.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that is interesting about the sport, and I'll speak from like the bottom of my heart with this, and like why I have a lot of respect for you is partially, well, you've earned all the respect just off what you've done, but like a guy like me, I look at everybody who I fish against, right, locally here, Noah Schultz. I mean, like Andy Walls, Keith Toome. I mean, I couldn't even name all the people that I fish against that I have just so much respect for. And it's like that there's 6-7 guys I can think of that should be trying to do it, and I feel like are at a caliber of talent that I strive to be at. And it's like, why it's a mind fuck, because it's like, I want to do that, and I think I could, but I don't think I'm better than this guy or this guy.
That's how I feel.
And that, to me, is what's inspiring about you, and the fact that you were willing to take a chance. And I feel like I struggle with that. I struggle with taking a chance on myself and not caring and having fun and going out and just seeing what the fuck happens. Instead, I like to try to be in control and make it happen.
Yeah, that's how I am too. And that's why that year in the Opens was like kind of such a crazy thing, because I'm very much of the same mindset as you in that way.
Yeah.
And I think it's the reason why, I mean, eventually we got to a point where we were competing at a high level on the river, but it's a reason why I probably never jumped in the Denny's locally. I stayed in the Bass Nation and tried to do it through the TOC because I was comfortable there, right?
Yep.
Then I was always too intimidated to fish the BFLs, and I finally jumped in some and had some success. I didn't fish a bunch, but a couple decent finishes. And I think taking that step from your local level to your regional level to your national level can be a really intimidating thing, especially when you don't consider yourself as good as or equal to some of the best guys locally.
Well, let's look at a LeBron James or
Yeah.
that confidence that oozes out of these professional athletes. All of them. So, like, I love seeing a humble Bob Downey do it, because that makes me feel like maybe I could do it.
Yeah.
Because I'm a humble person and I don't feel like I could do it.
Yeah.
Or I feel like other people should do it.
Yeah. It's a confidence thing. 100%. Because I can say that now after doing this at the elite level for 4 years, it's definitely a confidence thing. Like, and that's built through having some success at each level, for sure.
Yep.
You've kind of got to have that success at each level to give you the confidence to jump to that next step. But I don't look at myself as any better than the best guys competing on the Champions Tour or the Minnesota Bass Nation Team Trail or the BFLs, your better local regional events. I'm not any better than those guys. And those guys, if they had the stars align in the Opens for a year, a Noah Schultz, for example, those guys, no doubt in my mind they would be able to compete at the elite level.
We all know Noah Schultz can compete at the elite level, right?
Yeah.
But, like, getting yourself to believe that you can. Like, how did you... Cause to me, that's what I struggle with, is that self-worth, or that, betting on yourself. Like, starting this podcast, I thought of this podcast 5-6 years before I started it.
Sure.
Like,
yeah,
it took a lot to put myself out there with this, and with fishing. Like,
I think it's kind of like anything in life when you're taking risks, right? At first you have
you don't seem like a big risk taker.
No, I'm really
Like,
not.
you
A
seem
lot
like
of
a pretty
times,
conservative dude.
I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when it comes to fishing, maybe I'm a little bit more, but still pretty conservative and try to be calculated with, which can paralyze you at times.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Admittedly, will paralyze you at times if you're too calculated. Sometimes you got to let it go and just go for it.
Yep.
Way easier said than done.
Oh yeah.
But that's true in
you
a
can't
lot.
Think about feeling it.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's true in most things in life. Like whether you're starting a small business, starting, a venture into the Bassmaster Open, starting a podcast. Like those are all things that generally make people apprehensive.
Yeah,
and it's hard to take the first step. But I think a lot of times you can only think about it so much until you kind of just have to start taking that first step and seeing where it goes. Easier said than done, but it's got to start somewhere.
Right.
And you've got to start building confidence in yourself somewhere to be able to get to where you might envision yourself. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like I said, I'm super grateful to be where I'm at.
I love it.
And like extremely thankful. But yeah, there was definitely some risk taking involved for sure. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back.
You earned it. And I guess the risks taking, like, the interesting question I would have for you is probably two scenarios. Okay. So let's say scenario one, you have one top 10 finish in that whole Opens the first year you fish it, right?
Yep.
And it's at Toledo, let's say, right? Or let's say you have that good finish on Toledo and then you miss a check at all the other events.
Yeah.
Okay. So just one small taste. And then let's take scenario two where you finish 9th in the points. Like have a pretty solid shake, and like taste it. Okay, so scenario one, do you even fish another Open?
It's a good question.
It doesn't matter.
Really good question. With my job that I had at the time, I don't know if I would.
Right.
I don't know. That's a really good question. Really good. I think you get a taste for it and you come close. If you can figure out a way to do it another year, then then maybe you do another year.
Right.
But that year was such a weird, like, I had no expectations going into it that it's hard for me to answer what I would have done the next year if I didn't.
It's a cool story, like in that sense.
Yeah, but it's a really good question, because I'd like to tell you, yeah, absolutely, I'd be in the next year.
I knew it was a tough one to answer when I asked it, but
like I'd like to tell you that.
Right.
Because people probably doubt, your drive and your ambition and that sort of thing. If you fail, then you just backed out. But I think the honest truth is, yeah, I think it would be hard to go back and do it again, unless that was your like plan. That was, I'm all in. And
right.
To be 100% honest, as I've said, I wasn't really all in. It's definitely a dream, 100%, but I wasn't like.
How do you know you're going to like your dream? It's like, a lot of things are really good on paper or in your imagination, right? But then you get there. I mean, a lot of people have jobs where they get an interview and then they get a tour of the company and like it's this magical place, and then they get there and like 3 weeks in, they're like,
yeah,
these people are miserable.
Yeah. And I can tell you now, being here, I'm all in now at this point, right? Like things have changed now. Is it a job? Yeah, it's absolutely a job. It's stressful. It's a grind.
Explain that to me a little bit more, because I don't think people view it that way, but it is 100% a job.
Yeah, definitely a job. I mean, a job that I enjoy doing.
Is fishing less fun now?
I still love to fish for fun back home.
Sure.
I still get very excited about fishing in a non-tournament situation.
Yeah.
And I get excited for tournaments too, in a different way though. There's a lot more stress involved with them now, because it's how I, have to try and make a living.
There's more weight.
Way more weight. We have 9 events throughout the year. There's a lot of pressure put on those 9 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And to make the Classic, you can't really have many bad days throughout those 9 events. So a lot more pressure, but I still love, I fish a bunch back home. And I think living where I do now in Detroit Lakes, it offers great opportunity to go and push myself to, I love dumping my boat in a new lake I've never been to.
It's the greatest thing.
And trying to break it down in a day, and almost in a tournament situation.
Yeah.
It pushes me to not just go out and go through the motions. I feel like I learn a lot, and I'm in an area right now that I can do that.
Yeah, I smell like a Bob Downey YouTube channel somewhere. A day on the lake, baby, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've done that a bunch around the house the last couple of years, which is super fun. And I'm during the season, I try and be on the water 3 to 4 days a week at least.
Sure.
And not just for a couple hours. They're good, full days for the most part, where you're trying to learn new stuff. And that's where I mess around with rods and line and hooks and hookup ratio and all that sort of stuff, and new techniques with forward facing in this day and age. There's a lot to learn there. But yeah, I don't know really where I was going with that, but I'm in a good area to learn, and I enjoy fishing still as much today as I ever have, I guess.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was going to ask you, we were talking about how much the sport changed, and so we have a way we go about fishing up here in Minnesota. So it's kind of a 2-part question, but I was going to ask, what's something you've taken that you honed in up here and made work down there, and then what's a new technique that's really become a staple for you since you've been on the Elite Series? So
Sure.
What's something you've taken to the Elite Series that you've maybe done forever and had a lot of success with, that's kind of been an ace in the hole? And then what's some new stuff that's evolved, and how have you evolved with certain new techniques? Yeah,
I'm trying to think this year on
AT jig, I know for a fact.
But. AT jig on Seminole this year, I'd say 80% of my fish came on a all-terrain swim jig. up shallow.
Nice.
Fishing just how I would on the river pre-spawn. Exactly how I'd fish on the river. Like, those fish are either around the bed, still full of eggs, or they're like just getting up there and just covering a bunch of water shallow with a swim jig. So that's one thing that, that's Florida Georgia border, and I took that from the Mississippi River. A lot of my shallow power fishing techniques, whether it's flipping or on the Sabine River, I was throwing a little spinner bait this year on just current breaks when the tide was either coming in or going out. I never fished tidal, but I've fished rivers, so I understand how they set up in current. And so I would, just go down the bank with a little 6.6 medium St. Croix, little roll cast.
1991 Rick Clun that shit.
Yeah, with the little tiny compact spinner bait.
Pistol grip?
No, but it was,
Someone's gotta bring
it
back
should have had a pistol grip on it. It was a pretty short,
like it could've.
pretty short rod. But I used that rod on Toledo doing the same thing, just little roll casts.
Sure.
And I do that a lot in the spring on the river too. But then in terms of new techniques, anything with like your minnow profile and a jig head with forward facing,
It's really come on.
is a big deal.
Yeah.
I hate to even really talk about it too much, but I feel like we're at a point now where guys are learning. There's a lot to learn.
It only
about
works
it.
down south.
Yeah,
Yeah.
only down south. Like I use it on Lay Lake, and didn't really use it anywhere else. But no, that's a. But there's a lot.
Jason Christie won a classic doing it. I mean, Jacob Wheeler's won countless amounts of stuff.
Gussie won the
Gussie won the classic.
Yeah,
And if you're fishing in the South Shad Lakes,
yeah,
pelagic type lakes,
yeah,
that's a deal.
yeah. And I think we're only scratching the surface on it. There's a lot to learn with that. There's little intricacies to learn with that, and how you present the bait and what you do with the bait and what type of bait you're using, jig heads you're using. So there's a lot of, it's not just a jig head and a minnow exactly either. There's a skill to it,
It's its own art form.
Yeah.
Yep.
Much like flipping,
Yep.
much like throwing topwater frog or
Everything.
cranking. It's just as much a skill as any of those other things. So there's a lot to learn with it there too.
For
But
sure.
that's definitely something that you saw some in the past. We've seen big tournament wins like you alluded to, and I think you're only going to see more of it in the future.
Right, and it's interesting, like you watch Tyler Reve win the first one on a jerkbait forward-facing sonar. Then you watch Joey Cifuentes win with a drop shot forward-facing sonar. And then you watch Gussie win with the Demiki forward-facing sonar. And then, I can't remember, then they were spawning.
Yeah. Murray.
Yep, then they were spawning.
Santee.
Yep.
Luke Palmer.
Used it
Yeah.
from a structure fishing standpoint for that one.
Yeah.
And then we got to the smallmouth lakes, and it seemed to be
Yeah.
that hover Demiki kind of dominated deal. I can't remember St. Lawrence, how that one was.
More of a drop shot, it seemed like.
Sure.
But
And
yeah.
so do you have like a we talked about time management with it, and it's like you have to have a rotation of some sort with it, or you have one bait that you're using. So it's like, do you have a rotation of baits that you've kind of accumulated for that? And then it's like, do you throw all 5 of them before you stop throwing on that, or like?
Yeah, I definitely have a rotation. I kind of equate it to fishing shallow smallmouth. When I'm fishing shallow smallmouth, I'll have a rotation of baits that I throw at those fish.
Yep.
We don't need to get into detail on that, or we can. It doesn't matter.
I guess
but
half of them.
yeah, most people can guess what they are, but you have a rotation, much like bed fishing. You're not bed fishing, but you're throwing to fish that are up cruising, that are shallow, that you can see with your eyes, and you can see how they react to it. And it's similar that way with forward facing, because we can see them not with our eyes, but on our graph now.
It's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Almost, right?
Yeah.
You've got a spectrum with mood and fish's mood.
Right.
Right? You have like the crackhead spectrum and then like the heroin spectrum. Not to make drug references, but like you got like the and then you've got like that.
Yes.
Like dubstep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm flying up off the bottom to eat your bait.
And your rotation is that spectrum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So definitely have a rotation of baits for that.
Sure.
For sure. And most people, I mean, they're pretty standard. They're not like secret lures. You know,
Totally.
you're pretty typical stuff. Jerkbait, drop shot, Ned, the minnow, however you want to work that minnow.
Right.
You know, top water some too if there's fish high up in the water column. But
sure.
Yeah, it's your typical stuff, but you definitely have a rotation ready to go. And certain days you're gonna dial in maybe one or two of those that are catching them better than others.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, like talking to, I know the Vexus guys pretty well. Like, so Ryan Patterson, he knows Cody Huff pretty well.
Yeah.
And like Cody Huff supposedly is like Jesus with forward-facing sonar down in that Ozark area, and like watching like him talk about it. And I don't know how different it is than what we're doing or if it's deeper, but all his baits that he talks about a really small swim bait on a really heavy head.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I've found the opposite with my forward-facing sonar experience. You know what I mean? So it's like, is it just the body of water he's fishing, or is it,
I think so. I mean, Table Rock is kind of where Table Rock and Bull Shoals is typically where Cody fishes a lot.
Yep.
Outside
Lights
of
out there.
Yeah, and that's where he's dominating. And I suppose there's probably days where those fish are really high up in the water column, but I think a lot of them are, maybe 15 to 50 feet over 60 to 100.
Yeah, standing trees and like.
Yeah, so that bigger head, I think, just is it's an efficiency thing to get down to those fish quickly while he's seeing them on his graph.
Sure.
Whereas if you threw even a 1/4 ounce head, it's going to take a lot longer to get down. And by the time it gets down there, that fish is maybe moved and you're off of it and your cast is, not where it needs to be.
Right.
So I think that's probably where that heavier head comes in, if I were to guess.
To me, it was getting it because the fish are moving. I think they swim more or something. So if it's 30 feet down and swimming and you need to hit it on the head.
Yeah.
I mean, like, good luck with a 1/4 ounce type of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
that's kind of where that's where that art form comes in with that, right? I mean, it's not, you don't just turn it on and start seeing fish and start catching them. There's a lot to it in terms of rod and line and hook shape and jig head weight and swim bait versus straight tail versus other baits, and there's a lot to it that these guys like Cody are really dialed into. I think so
what do you feel like you've had to do to catch up with those guys who are probably a little bit ahead of
definitely
ahead of me when it comes to that style of fishing, so like what have you done to cut, like, I know you time on the water obviously, but like
that's the biggest thing, time on the water. And when I'm out there around home, I'm throwing at everything, even if I know it's not a bass, to get better at my shot.
Dude, okay, that's a nugget. Like
there's a lot of carp that suspend in our lakes, and I'll throw at I shouldn't say I'd throw at every one of them, but I throw at a lot of them just to see if I can hit them.
Dude, that's actually, I think, really smart.
It's like practicing your...
It's like shooting your bow at a fucking fake deer.
Yeah, it's like shooting your bow. It's like, taking 100 shots a day.
It's the same thing.
Snapshots a day or slap shots a day. It's no different. Like, those guys that are good at it are generally more accurate. But obviously, they're really good at locating
fish.
fish.
Takes less time to point at them and less time to hit them.
Yeah.
Right?
They're more efficient.
Muscle memory. It's turning that into...
Yeah.
Like, I still have to think about it a little bit, but
Yeah.
I'm starting to get to the point where when I don't, I hit it. And
Yeah.
it's almost like when I think about it, I don't hit it.
Yeah. So that's one thing I've done a lot of this summer
That makes sense.
is just kind of, it sounds silly, but practicing your
It
shot.
doesn't. I don't
And-
think anyone's ever mentioned that.
And
like
and
that.
it's different under every condition. Like flat, calm conditions, it's easier to hit your target versus windy conditions. 100%. Like it's very difficult in heavy wind to control your boat while also getting on your target while also putting your bait on that target. Like, so there's
Imagine shooting your bow off of a boat
Yeah.
in 3 footers.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like shooting your nice bow that you got all sighted in, right?
Yeah.
And now put 3-foot rollers on
Yeah.
and hit your target,
Yeah,
right? That's the
exactly.
difference.
That's exactly a good comparison. So that's one thing I've worked on a lot of this last summer to try and get better at that. Doesn't mean I'm catching fish or like dialing in my bait is, well, you dial in your bait some because it's rate of fall, and depending on the conditions, you learn what works better under windy versus calm. And the other thing is how fish react under different conditions too. Like when it's really flat calm, a lot of times you get some they'll be high up in the water column, even under some windy conditions. But if it's like big rollers, they're not like a foot under the surface. But if it's flat calm, a lot of times you'll get them really high flyers is what I call them.
Really?
Yeah, and that's where like you got to go pretty finessey on those at times.
The high ones?
Yeah.
What do you throw at them?
Like just lighter jig heads and
Sure.
smaller baits and that sort of deal. So learning those little intricacies of it too is a big deal.
How
Like,
high flyers are we talking? Are we talking like right below the surface?
Yeah, in some instances.
Now I feel like we're getting juicy, and I feel bad for asking, but we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
That's a wild. Do you tilt your deucer up for them?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
I've heard you could do that.
You can. I think you can.
I'm still learning, but
But that's also, yeah, I probably shouldn't have even said that.
we
but
can cut it if you want to.
No, you can leave it in.
Okay.
That's no big deal.
Thank you,
it's
Bob
pretty,
Downey.
I'll give a little nugget to the listeners.
That's a fucking nugget. I
What?
do think the higher they are in the water column, like the easier it is to make them bite if they're a bass, a smallmouth especially.
Yeah, a lot of times they are.
Why is that?
I just don't. I don't know if they're up there looking like they're up there ready to feed, or if they can. If it's a reactionary deal, a lot of times if you're on them and you splash your bait near them, you'll see that fish react instantly, and it's kind of like one of those feeding frenzy reactions, I think. Like all of a sudden they heard something splash, they think it's maybe another fish busting or bait fish busting, and they're on it like that.
Well, we have it happen all the time with largemouth when my jig hit the water and it had it.
Yeah, yeah.
Same thing.
Whereas that fish that's maybe, I don't know, 15 feet down, maybe they don't hear it as well. They see it. They'll see it. Like it gets a foot or two under the water. Oftentimes you'll see them shoot up, but I don't think they hear it as well as that one that's right below the surface.
Sure.
So I don't know. But yeah, that high flyer deal is definitely a thing. And you can catch them on top water too, which is kind of fun.
Watching your I haven't had the like magical
Yeah.
experience that I've seen like on YouTube where
Mhm.
guys are just
Yeah.
watching their top water on the sonar instead.
I really
crazy.
haven't had that, but I've had it where those ones right under the surface, you throw it pretty close to them and they're on it pretty quick.
Sure.
But there's that, and all just seeing one thing I've noticed is if you can have it so your transducer is picking up the surface of the water, it'll catch that splash and make a flare of light or whatever it might be on the transducer, and that helps you pick up your bait faster and then also find it falling faster. Maybe you found that too, but
For sure.
yeah.
And if I tilt my deucer up, I can watch my spook make bubbles underneath, so I can I played with it, but
yeah, so that's a little tip too. If you can see the
It's a nuggie.
surface, like, because at times if you don't see it splash, you're kind of having to swish back and forth until you pick up your bait, and then you can follow it down. But if you can see that splash, you can get on it a lot easier.
Yeah, it's like you're looking for that little funnel on the graph up top.
Yeah.
I think screen size makes a huge difference. I've spent some time in a buddy's boat.
Okay.
My buddy Hayden's boat, live scoping on his 9-inch.
Yeah.
Versus my 12, and it's like finding your bait. Is so much harder on that 9-inch.
Okay.
Granted, I think he was running the last model live scope, so it wasn't the most up to date. But But I think about the pixels and how.
Yeah.
And it's like I get to the 12-inch and it's like night and day. So to me,
I can see that.
I'm not a big guy that you need to spend this much to catch a bass, but definitely noticed a difference with that. Yeah. But it's hard when the wind makes it especially a skill to me, and that to me is where I think I can scope fine, like spent a lot of time doing it, but when it's really windy, being efficient with it still, when it's still windy like that, and not putting in the boat in a spot where you can't put it, or you know, staying downwind of those fish if the spot lays out a little bit different.
Yeah. Especially if
frustrating.
It's very frustrating, especially on I mean, we have big bodies of water here in Minnesota, Leech, Mille Lacs, those sorts of places. Where I've experienced it is like St. Clair and Champlain. You get those big winds. You can't really, like, so big that you can't spot lock. You can't hold into the wind or push into the wind. So to be able to use your forward facing, you got to go with the wind, right?
Facing up or facing down?
Like have the wind at your back.
Oh, so the wind's on the back of the outboard pushing the whole boat forward.
Yeah, and you're fishing for, suspenders, or on St. Clair, those fish kind of roam, so you're just out in the abyss kind of panning around, letting the wind push you over these pieces, maybe a small rise or something. And the hardest part with that is you do locate a fish where you want to throw at. You have one, maybe two opportunities to get on that fish before you blow over it, because the wind is so strong.
Right.
And you can't, if you were to try and turn around and stay on that fish, you can't do it effectively. Like your trolling motor's coming out of the water, like especially on like a place like St. Clair, those waves get pretty big even with a 10-mile-an-hour wind. So those are tough situations too, where you gotta work.
Thrive in that situation yet.
Like you gotta work on that skill as well, as you're not always out there in light winds where you can just sit. And that was the case on Champlain on day one, as well as St. Clair on day one too. But so there, anyways, I know we've harped on it a lot, but there's definitely a skill to it for sure. A lot to learn.
Well, Koya, he's got like pretty insane like saltwater setup, and Jay Carlson was saying how that interferes with like other sonars and stuff.
I guess I wasn't I didn't realize he had the saltwater one, but I could see that. I didn't know that was the case, but it would not surprise me.
I heard he has two screens for the same, like, so instead of like 100 on one screen, he's got 300 feet on two screens.
Huh. Interesting.
But I think about if you could see those fish 300 feet away, if you're in that downwind scenario,
be a huge advantage.
Holy fuck, Bob Downey. Like, now you know you have 200 feet to figure out which direction they're swimming.
Yeah, I bumped mine way out in those situations.
Sure.
Way further than I normally would.
Yep.
So I can't imagine if you had 300, like what that would do for you. Because it would definitely help. The hard part about that is you're not accurate with your cast much past 100. Like I think
it's a boat positioning thing till you see him at 100. And
yes.
It's preparing.
Yes.
It's preparing it's like this. It's this new stage of everything we're talking about. Of like, you've got these blobs between 200 and 300, and the goal is to get them to this 100. And as soon as those blobs hit that 100-foot line, that is what you've perfected. The whole masterpiece of positioning your boat down current to understand they're swimming to the east at about a 1.5 mile an hour pace, and I need to put my boat right here and up cast. Boom, got them.
Yeah.
Holy fuck, that is a skill. Like, that is a skill.
Yeah, very much so, for sure. And you're right. It's definitely boat positioning until they get into range where you can hit them. And yeah, you're having to cast differently too as you get onto those fish.
Oh, the dumb.
Like when
How dumb of casts did you make before live scope versus
Yeah.
once you had live scope?
Yeah.
Like that, the dumb 30-foot cast or 35-foot cast as you're
Yeah.
about to blow over that fish.
Yeah.
I don't think we've all casted as horrible
Yeah.
or looking horrible as we did till
Yeah.
we got that shit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, it's definitely changed things from that standpoint.
You have
I mean-
a neck brace sponsor yet?
Do I? No, but I might need one.
That's a good non-endemic.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah.
It would be. Yeah, it's changing things. It'd be interesting to see what guys' setups are the next couple of years. Like now I'm hearing of trolling motor brakes on the backs of boats and
Wait, what? Trolling motor what?
brakes. These boat brakes. Have you heard
Oh
of
my!
this?
What? Like I've heard of trim tabs, like on walleye boats, like that, like
So crappie guys and a couple
drift socks.
Yeah, it's like that, but they're trolling motors. Props.
that
Yeah. Stop your boat.
like thrust. What?
Yeah.
That's
See,
gonna be a thing.
it's a thing in the crappie world right now.
Really?
And a couple guys in the bass world are starting to use them. I don't think anyone on the elites had them this year. I know there's a couple guys that fished the Toyota series that had them. They're basically something you attach to whatever poles you got, whether it's Raptors, power pole, and you can control them from the front of your boat. So if you're drifting, with the wind, like we were talking about, and you see those fish at 100 and you don't want to drift over them, you hit those trolling motor brakes in the back and it thrusts your boat backwards, essentially stopping your boat in place so you can make an accurate cast and not blow over those fish.
And then the extra 6 bilge pumps start kicking in, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I suppose if
you know what I
if you
mean?
got
Like,
waves
we're talking
coming over,
bass boats.
if you got waves coming over the back, yeah, I mean that.
Yeah, I'm gonna need 2 back thrusters and about 12 bilge pumps.
So
Yeah.
that's where it's starting to get like, man, where are we going with this thing? Is that getting out of hand? So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But
somewhat of an arms race, if you will.
Yeah. So
People are gatting up. Like,
yeah. So
I mean,
we'll see.
you saw Koya 5 transducers. How many elite guys that didn't run 5 last year with the schedule next year that ain't gonna like straight up go bougie as fuck on their boats? Like,
yeah, I won't be one of them next year, but I know there will be guys that are doing that.
you're running same system.
I'm going to.
Like, it's 2 classics deep. Like,
That's kind of my
Yeah, baby.
mindset
yep.
until I feel like I'm at a major disadvantage. I'll probably run what I'm most comfortable with at this point.
10 mega live transducer.
No, probably not. I see the advantages of what they're doing. I understand why they're doing it. It's not my style.
Not mine either.
And so that I want to try and stay true to my style while at the same time keeping a pulse on it to see if it's like affecting me from staying consistent, I guess you might say.
Well, that 5 transducers, I mean, it's basically a very small EDM concert under the water, if you will, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of noise going on, and I hear chatter about it, and I feel like I've maybe seen it on some lakes, but like those fish are starting to get a little weary to it, right?
You would think so. Yeah.
And you start to put 5 transducers on looking out 100 feet all directions of the boat versus that one transducer flashing around. Those fish, I gotta feel like they adapt. Fish adapt.
Yeah, I would think over time these fish will adapt.
Are you seeing it already?
I don't know if the smallmouth, if we're seeing it from that standpoint, maybe the largemouth. And I think over time we'll see it evolve where those fish are adapting more.
Right.
Like,
is this a brief stint in time? You know, the style, is this a brief stint in time before things shift back? Or is this here to stay for 25, 30 years? I have a hard time thinking about 25, 30 years of this.
Yeah.
Before those fish say, I'm going to swim into this grass clump and never leave.
Right. Yeah. I think nature has a way of protecting its babies, whatever it is, animals, fish. You see it in deer hunting all the time. I bow hunt a lot in the fall, and big bucks do not respond well to pressure. I mean,
what about buffalo, though? Like, because we decimated those fuckers
Yeah,
pretty near.
that's true. And maybe
not to argue with you, but
yeah, no, I don't know. I've never hunted buffalo, I
Same.
guess. But
had
I
a bison burger before, you know.
But I can tell you, whitetails, and most animals in general don't respond well to pressure, unless they're not hunted. You know,
Right.
like you go into state parks where they're not hunted and they're not, they're kind of oblivious to you. But when they're hunted, they don't like that, and so
Yeah, weird. They don't like getting killed. I don't understand why.
exactly. So fish, you would think, based on what we've seen in other animal worlds, you'd think they would adapt. We'll see.
Right. I think the South is kind of like the
Proving grounds, maybe.
Yeah, because Tonka is now feeling like a southern lake to the point where it's like a southern lake where 20 pounds wins,
Yeah.
but you only need 16 to take top 5 or 6 or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's dropping off a lot more, and you don't go up and bust a school unless the weather's right.
Yeah.
Unless the conditions are right, or you're the first one to that ledge fish on Chickamauga or what have you.
Yeah.
And now you can only bust 2 or 3 out of a school, and they all spook and scatter because nature has a way of.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I think that we don't have an answer to that question. I was just curious. You've obviously lived through that year of forward facing, so you would know better than me if that was starting to happen.
It seems like it is. I think only time will tell, and it's hard. I'm not able to predict that.
Well, it's going to be one
see.
of those years where, like, it's going to go the other way, right? Like, right now, it's like you had those guys who weren't relying on it.
Yeah.
That now are, like, feeling like the burn of having to do something that's uncomfortable. And I'm just curious about what year that John Cox or whoever, right?
Yeah.
Just blows the doors off and everybody has to, like, shift back that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but it's got to. I don't know. I don't see how it goes any other direction besides back to
what it used to be. Yeah. I would think so at some point. Who knows, though? It's just that's such an unknown.
For sure.
I don't know. Bass is monitoring it. Like they interviewed all the anglers this year, called all of us, and got us, each one of our opinions on it, how we feel about it, what we think should happen from our perspective and the fans' perspective, and they've decided to not make any changes for next year. So, you want 50 transducers on your boat next year, you can have 50. If you want 0, you can have 0. So nothing will change for next year. They say they're going to continue to monitor it year by year and throughout the season to kind of have a better database before they make any decisions, if any decisions will even be made. But that's kind of where the sport's at right now. They're aware of it. They've interviewed the anglers, gotten our opinion, but they're not making any changes at this point.
Sure.
Sure. So we'll see.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I know Bass will still eat a jig, and I know you've done pretty well on like an all-terrain tackle jig.
Yeah.
And I've used all-terrain tackle jigs since I was a kid, and I guess talking a little jig fishing here.
Yeah.
I mean, you got brown and black and blue is how I was raised on a jig. Is you got 2 colors of a jig, and it's a half or a 3/8 is how I was raised on. But like, do you have kind of a jig system like with the AT or whatever that you roll with?
Yeah, I mean at 3/8 and half is kind of my standard too. I like green pumpkin. It's kind of like cliche for a bass guy to say that, but I like green pumpkin, black, blue. I keep it pretty simple. All terrain's got awesome colors. They've got cool variations of all different colors, and I've messed around with some of those, seems like around the country, the more I fish tournaments that are televised and have a lot of media coverage around them, you start to understand that like color definitely matters to an extent, but a lot of it is confidence based too.
Yeah.
Because what you think is the only thing they're biting on that lake that day, you come to find out when you look at the top 10 gallery that that's not all that they're biting that day.
Right.
So I think color is a big confidence thing. Obviously you've got your polar opposites, your whites, your chartreuses versus browns and greens and that sort of deal. But I think your variations of green pumpkins or variations of black blues is more of a confidence thing than anything else. But yeah, I love flipping a jig. I love throwing their swim jig. That's a big confidence thing for me. This year on the Elites, I threw it a ton. I'd say throughout our first 6 tournaments, I threw a swim jig a lot. Didn't always weigh fish on it, but it's a good bait to cover water, practice.
It's an amazing lure. Versatile. There's a lot more to I've learned there's a lot more to a swim jig than I previously thought.
Yeah, especially down south dealing with shad spawns that we don't have up here. A swim jig is a big deal.
Did you figure out the southern swim jig shake thing?
Yeah, actually, you know what? I forgot about that. You asked about how I was catching them on Smith. I forgot I was on a shad spawn in the morning in that tournament.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah.
But anyways, that just clicked back into my head. Yeah.
That's a cool little deal to figure out, not being from shad spawn water.
Yeah, around floating docks and stuff. Cool. That was a cool deal. But yeah, so swim jig's a big deal. And All Terrain's got some cool stuff coming. They're in a cool position right now with Clam Outdoors buying them a few years ago. And then COVID hit right away and everyone kind of struggled to just keep product in stock. And now that we're kind of beyond that, we're in a neat time where they're coming out with some new stuff with the Hail Mary Ned and the new kind of Midwest finesse swim jig, more of a fluorocarbon open water swim jig. That'd be a really good one around floating docks too.
For sure.
Not so much your heavier cover, but we've got some other stuff in the works too with them that I think people are going to be excited about in the future. Cool. And I'm really excited about too.
You had some help develop
actually have with Mike Davis and Nate Nipper over there. Yeah, awesome dudes to work with.
Yeah.
Nipper's, really good local angler.
Fantastic angler. I stayed with him at Nationals last winter, and he can catch him. He's pretty sleeper.
Yeah, he's dialed into what he's doing and has some cool ideas. So it's fun to bounce stuff off them and Nipper, and it's those smaller companies. You can work pretty fast in developing new stuff when you have that personal relationship with them. And that's one thing that's really cool about what I'm doing now today too, is not only the tournament side, but being involved with product development and giving feedback and that sort of stuff is really cool. And having, and like being in the area where I'm at, you can go plunk the boat in a lake 5 minutes from the house and quick give a jig a test and get some good feedback back to Mike and Nate, and we can kind of roll with it from there.
I hooked every log in the lake. Might need to change the light tie on this one.
Yeah. So All Terrain's, they're my oldest sponsor. I've worked with them since high school, back when Haugie owned the company.
Yeah.
And so to still work with them today, fishing on a national level is a cool deal.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Hey guys, Gaff here with Waypoint Angler Supply. I'm hanging out here at our JDM wall. We got a large variety of product. Hold on. Hey guys, Gaff here with Waypoint Angler Supply. I'm just out here hanging out at our JDM wall with my buddy Teal, and we're going over some JDM product. We've got ourselves some Fish Arrow, some Duo Realis, Depths, and G-Crack, all for you. But it's not just the tackle that we've got. We've got ourselves some reels, some rods, all from Japan, some BFS stuff, all the good stuff that you're looking for from Japan that you can't find anywhere else. So swing on into Waypoint Angler Supply and get yourself stocked up.
We'll see you here at Waypoint Angler Supply.
.com? .com. Use the code GALAXY20 to save 20% on your next tackle binge. This podcast is brought to you by my brother from another mother, my tournament partner, and the best rod builder north of the equator that still has 20/20 vision, Veselka Fishing and Customs, specializing in custom fishing rods. Your custom rod, the way you want it, because it has to be your rod. However, he has a wide variety to choose from, including his all-new for 2023 custom chicken rod. If you throw the big fluff, the hairy Gary, the rotisserie dissery, the half-ounce Palomalu, the 3/4-ounce rooster biscuit, the lightener looking like D. Snyder, you're going to want to be throwing the Veselka Fishing Chicken Special Big Hair Jig Rod. Mr. Veselka spent a lot of time on this rod, and it has the perfect action to throw, hook, and land those fish that you maybe pulled the bait out from because the rod was too stiff, or had them spit it because your rod didn't have the backbone. Well, the new Chicken Special from Veselka Fishing and Customs has worked to solve both of those issues, along with superior balance and quality components. So head on over to his website, veselkafishing.com. That's VOCELKA fishing.com. Pick this rod up before it's too late, because up here in the North Country, they about to be schooling.
Yep.
Yeah, you're with, you got Rapala, St. Croix.
Yeah.
I guess what's the future? Do you have any kind of projects or future kind of things in the works that are worth talking about, or
Nothing crazy beyond just trying to grow with the companies that have supported me this far.
Yep.
Or thus far. I've tried to really stay loyal to those companies that took a chance on me right away, and to the point where I don't even send stuff out to other competing companies
Smart.
after year end. It's just try and grow those relationships with the companies that I've worked with so far, and do the best that I can for those companies. I'm still at a point in my career where, sure, I've fished on the elites for 4 years and made a few classics, but I don't feel like I have the leverage that maybe your more established pros might have, to go pursue some big non-endemic type deal. But those are certain things that I'm definitely always kind of trying to explore in each off season a little bit too. But for me, the biggest thing is trying to grow with the companies that have supported me this far. And I love the companies I work with. I believe in them.
Yep.
A lot of the guys that I work with are pretty well in tune with what's going on in the industry and the tournament world and tournament fishermen. A lot of them are fishermen themselves, which is super fun. So, yeah, pretty lucky, I feel.
Yeah, man, it's been cool to watch you. And I guess getting off the fishing train a little bit, I guess when Bob Downey's not bass fishing, what I know you hunt a little bit, but what else do you like to do for fun? I know you come from a little bit of a hockey background, but you've got a wife, you've got, there's more to life than bass fishing for the most, a little bit.
Yeah, I grew up playing hockey. Grew up in Minnesota, so a lot of kids play hockey in Minnesota, but that's a
thing to do.
That was a huge passion of mine through high school, and played in the state tournament. And
that's cool.
In high school, so that was a really fun deal. Playing down at the X, and didn't play in college afterwards. But my sister married a guy that played and still does play professionally in Germany. So we've visited them last year, which is a super cool trip. Got to see a couple games. They've got 3 little boys.
It's not Jack Connolly, is it?
No, he played for Did you go to UMD?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, he went to UMD.
I know. I watched him. He graduated when I was a freshman. It was when, it was his last year.
Yeah, when they won the national championship. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brady Lamb. He's number 2 Dude. He was a defenseman on that national championship team.
Yes. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was pretty close.
Yeah.
Like I was the same team at least. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't think Brady would mind. So Brady's my brother-in-law, awesome dude, and
Yeah, he's a tough motherfucker.
Cool.
If I remember right.
yeah, he's a big dude.
Yeah.
Awesome, really solid defenseman and fun to watch him. And they got 3 little boys that are crazy about hockey too and keep them busy. And they're actually in town this week, so we're able to spend some time with them.
Cool.
But yeah, otherwise just hanging with friends and family and, doing little trips here and there with my wife every so often if we can get away in the off season. Nothing, we don't do anything crazy, but like run over to a northern Minnesota town for the weekend, or we did our honeymoon up on the Gunflint Trail and North Shore, that sort of deal.
What's it been like for her? Like,
yeah.
Okay, because we always talk about how it affects or all these experiences for that person, but there's a lot of weight for that significant other. And I guess, did you guys have any challenges with this whole thing with her?
She's been amazingly supportive.
Cool.
Which makes my life easier for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to get any divorce papers out. That's good.
No. Yeah, like she's been awesome from that standpoint.
Sweet, dude.
And I couldn't ask for more. It doesn't mean it's not hard to leave. That's the hardest part. Is she's a teacher, so she'll travel with me in the summertime.
Sure.
But in our early spring, late winter tournaments, she's staying home and I'm leaving, and that's hard. That's definitely probably the hardest part of what we do is the time away.
Yeah.
But she's been awesome. She loves being out in the boat when we're around the house.
Sure.
She'll pick up a rod if I start catching them. Otherwise, she's usually reading or something in the back. But which I don't blame her. She loves just being out on the water, and
she waits till they're biting.
Yeah.
And cast here, catch one. Oh, that was fun. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
But I don't blame her. She's she's awesome. So super supportive. Her family's really supportive, and that makes a big difference. Like
night and day
on tournament days and tournament weeks. I can really focus on what I'm doing. And
how is that different from your peers? Like, I guess, what do you like?
Yeah,
what you've got versus what you see.
Yeah,
like I don't get to see that, dude.
Yeah, there's definitely some situations each year, depending on the year, who the guy is, where they've maybe got stuff going on off the water, whatever it is. Life happens.
Yep.
And man, that can be tough. And it's it's probably going to happen to me someday too.
Not with your wife. You have a strong bond, and it's going really well.
Yeah, not from that standpoint, but other things in life might happen, right?
For sure.
Whatever,
we all cheat death daily.
Yeah. So, that happens, and that can definitely affect guys' performance for sure. So no fault to themselves. That's just what happens. And you see it every year, something, whether guys have medical exemptions or a guy's maybe trying to push through a medical issue or some sort of, pain that no one else knows about, but it's clearly affecting his performance. A lot of that stuff goes on that gets, doesn't get talked about. So
is there any other things that don't get talked about like that
on tour?
Yeah, that
there
within reason,
Yeah. I'm trying
without
to
throwing
think.
anyone's marriage or family under the bus.
Yeah. I mean, there's always fishermen like to complain about stuff all the time.
No.
I mean, and then so I try. That kind of goes back to what I was saying originally after that St. John's tournament, where I told myself I'm not going to make excuses for myself and just buckle down and figure out how to get better and don't make excuses about it. But there's a lot of that goes on off the water that I have a hard time listening to. I mean, I feel pretty fortunate to be where I'm at, so I don't have a lot of time for people that like to complain about rules or whatever it might be, but or whether it was confrontations on the water. I mean, we all have them. I've had them. I've complained about them. But in the end, it's like,
Who did it?
I won't say.
Smart.
Yeah, I won't say. But it happens to all of us. It's just the nature of the game, right?
Yeah.
It's going to happen. You put 100 of the best guys on these bodies of water, you're not always going to have your stuff to yourself. And so you got to figure out how to navigate that. And for the most part, the guys are pretty cool. Like, I would say my experience on the Elite Series has been really good so far. Very accommodating. Everyone, it's very much like a brotherhood or a family on the road.
Yeah.
It's a lot different than, I think you have that to an extent on the local level, right?
To an extent, yeah.
To an extent you do.
There's good
but,
people we fish with, yeah.
There's a brotherhood in a way.
Mm-hmm. Champs Tour for sure.
Yeah. And I think on the elite level, I see it even more because we're all kind of going through the same gauntlet together.
There's a lot more magnitude to what you are all going through. So
Yeah.
that brotherhood is probably way stronger than what we experience here that way.
Like we are genuinely happy for a guy if they do well.
Yeah.
And you're, for the most part, willing to help out anybody no matter what the situation is.
Sure.
And that was noticeable from my rookie year till now. Even as a rookie, guys were super accommodating, welcoming, willing to talk to you in the weigh-in line, all that sort of stuff. There was there's not a lot of animosity there. At least I don't see it. Maybe there are for some of the veterans that have been around for a while, but for me, I don't really notice it.
We haven't spent a lot of time together, Bob Downey, but I'd have a hard time like getting upset with you or like I feel like there's guys who bring that on more, and I feel like you're also a peaceful dude, and that's what you're putting out with the world, which is going to attract more peaceful dudes.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that too. But for the most part, it's been pretty good. I try not to get too riled up with stuff that happens on the water. You get cut off or whatever. It's just like, all right, I'll go to the next bank and figure it out. Unless it's like where you want to be, then you might.
First Elite Series event versus like 10th is probably a little different feeling when you get cut off.
It is. Yeah, I mean, like my first couple years, I would just pick up the trolling motor and go. And now I might, at least try and figure it out so that we can both be in that area. And because the ultimate goal is there's 50 guys that are making the cut each week, right? Mm-hmm. So one guy's going to win. And, if you can work together and both make the cut, that's a success. In my eyes, some people might say that I ought to be shooting for more than that, but wins are not something you can necessarily manifest or like expect to happen all the time. So making a cut on the elites is a big deal.
You do the best you can with the room you've got and what you've got, right?
Yeah.
And you've learned that from the opens when if shit's going to go down and it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But I'm going to do the best with what I got. But
yeah, it's weird how top tens happen or a win happens locally or regionally or nationally. It's such a fine line, right? Because that,
very fine.
Oh my gosh. And so to be upset about a 20th place finish or something, I don't know. For me, those are wins a lot of times. And consistency in this sport is a win. And sure, do I want to win a blue trophy or classic? Absolutely. I would love to. But I think that happens so rarely that you've got to find wins in other things too.
You got to find smaller wins, so to speak. And that doesn't mean 20th is a small win, but it's a smaller win than first. But if you look at it as a small win, it doesn't maybe feel like a...
Yeah, and doesn't mean I'm not driven to win. I want to win. But you also kind of got to find happiness in what you're doing day to day too, in a way.
I think there's that's something I can't imagine doing anything else, but finding happiness in the day-to-day to me and enjoying the ride is something that I struggle with, and I think a lot of people do. But you've probably you talked about the brotherhood a little bit, I guess, and to me that's really cool. And I guess, who have some people that you've gotten close with on the elites that maybe you didn't expect, or that was just kind of manifested?
Yeah. I mean, like Caleb Kufal and Pat Schlopper, we've become pretty close. I wouldn't say we share 100% information on the road, but we help each other break down places.
Sure.
And those that kind of happen naturally, just kind of from where we came from. We're all from the Midwest.
I know Schlapper pretty good. He's a good dude.
Yeah. And I've got to know Pat pretty well, and we're sharing generalities, not specific areas. We're not on the phone during practice days.
He doesn't strike me as the guy.
Yeah, it's quick notes after the day, and you still got to have the confidence to do your own thing and figure it out on your own, but having those little nuggets can help at times. But like a guy like Polnick, I've gotten to know him pretty well. He's an awesome dude.
Seems like it.
Really down to earth, normal guy. A lot of the guys that camp, I have a truck camper, slide-in truck camper, so I camp at all the events. A little upgrade from the tent, but it's still somewhat roughing it. We don't have a bathroom.
It's still rough,
in the camper, so I got to use the campground bathrooms, which are sometimes good, sometimes pretty sketchy.
For sure, sketchy. Sometimes,
yeah. Like
do the hover. You got hover.
Yeah, better bring your flip flops for the shower. And we had at Lake Fork. There's a campground there that we've stayed at now for like the 3 different times I've been there, and their bathroom is about as worse as any of them that we've stayed at, and they don't have it open for the rest of the year. They just open it for us because they're concerned about people coming by and using them that maybe are homeless or something like that.
Gotcha.
That kind of area. Picturing that in your head.
Yep.
So my rookie year, we stayed there, and there was like this skeleton of a dead salamander in the corner of the bathroom of the shower, like
in the shower,
corner of the shower,
showering with the dead salamander.
Yeah. Not great. Got her flip flops on, so it's okay, and I'm not about to pick up that thing and move it.
No.
Just kind of part of the territory, right, of being on the road and living in a camper.
Yep.
So the kicker of it is we go back the next year in 2021. That same salamander is there a year later. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a flavor of life on the road at times. Not all glamorous on the Elite Series, but we're still pretty lucky to be there.
I mean, if you said I was fishing the Bassmaster Elite Series, but I had to shower with a dead salamander 10 times, I'd say I'll do it 20.
Yeah, right.
I'll do it 20.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Not that bad.
From that standpoint, like when I think about it like that,
like,
I would shower with the dead salamander to fish the Elite Series, but
so anyways, that was a bit of a tangent.
To what most people experience.
So we're not staying in luxury homes by any means, but I like the camper deal. It's my own place, my own routine. I can do my own thing. I still am social with the guys at the campground, but I can go to bed at a decent time too. And I've rented houses, and it's super fun because you get to talk fishing with the guys, but usually you're up till midnight, 1 o'clock, and on 3 days of practice, and then you got a tournament coming. It takes a toll out of you, and sleep is a big deal during those weeks. When you're there to do a job, if the
it's a 4-day event. It's not like a 1-day Silverado.
Yeah.
Where you can get drunk the night before and get through that day and then sleep later. No, you get through that day, you got another day.
Yeah.
You get through that day, you got another day.
Right.
You get through that day, guess what?
Yeah.
You got another day.
Yeah. So it's a little different.
It's a marathon.
Than local stuff. And so I like the camper for that reason. But yeah, that was a bit of a tangent off of who I've gotten to know pretty well, but a lot of the guys at camp, there's a bunch. Carl and Bill Lowen, Matt Herron, Caleb and Pat both camp. Luke Palmer and Patrick Walters used to. I think they're renting houses now, but all those guys are super cool. really approachable. Steve Kennedy and his family, they're awesome people.
I believe that.
Yeah, they're really cool family. Kind of just like, they don't, like, you can tell they don't idolize money or anything like that, which I can appreciate in people. They're kind of just, they they'll make it a point to take little trips off the beaten path on the way to the next tournament, do a camping trip somewhere to state park on the way. They're they're a neat family. So a lot of cool guys that I've got to meet, which is pretty neat.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. And I guess, like, has there been techniques that you've kind of showed, like, I don't know, you see, like, there's guys who will find roommates in different regions of the country and use that as kind of an advantage. And to me, you don't necessarily need a room with people to, like, learn other things from other people and whatnot. And I don't know how much of that goes down because obviously you're camping by yourself. And Pat Schlapper, I can't imagine he's going to give up all the goods.
No, but we've become pretty close where he's pretty open with me. Pat is super versatile. He's one of those guys like a Patrick Walters that has 20 rods on the deck each tournament day. Caleb's the opposite. He'll have like
2-rod Todd.
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah. He's more the John Cox spectrum. Pat Schlapper is more like your Brian Thrift, Brian New, Patrick Walters spectrum, and I'm kind of in the middle. So I've learned from both of them in that way.
Sure.
So it's a good mix from that standpoint for sure. But they all have success in their own way too. So that's also taught me to try and like not stray too far from my style either.
Right. Well, it's like you look at like a Coupal scenario, right?
Yeah.
And it's like he's 2-rod Todd, but he's got 2 Bassmaster Elite Series wins being 2-rod Todd. And there's a lot of people who aren't 2-rod Todd that maybe have more top 10s than Caleb Coupal.
Yeah.
Right? But
yeah.
To me, that's the 2-rod Todd scenario. It's like, I'm going to win one of these bastards, and I might take 100th or whatever, and I don't care. I'm here to win a tournament, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I have a hard time with that because I can't stand saying I'm going to do this all day, even though that might not be the deal.
Yeah.
Like, I want to learn and figure out the deal.
That's kind of how I am. And I've gotten to be more that way the further into my elite career that I've gotten.
Sure.
I would say I'm definitely more versatile now than I was when I fished the Opens. 100%.
I don't know how you aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. That's the other thing. The elites is it pushes you to get better.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. You're always picking up little nuggets here and there.
Right.
And that's fun. Like, that's really fun to me.
Dude.
Right.
Yeah,
and
that's
like
a dream.
always learning, and you hang around those guys enough and you pick up little things, and it's cool that way. I mean, it can be overwhelming at times because you've like, when I qualified for the elites, if I were to fish a smallmouth tournament, I'd maybe have 4 to 5 spinning rods on the deck. Now I've got like, you might have double 12 spinning rods on the deck because you learned so many more techniques.
Right.
So there's also a fine line there of, spreading yourself too thin. Right.
That's my constant battle is I feel like I'm constantly complicating and simplifying at the same time, and there's years where I will expand, and then there's like next year I want to like take what I expanded on this year and didn't have enough success with, and now I've kind of like playing around with that stuff, hone it down just a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah, we're like, this year was definitely a year where I would say I expanded my smallmouth like repertoire, I suppose you might say, more than I ever have. And I think a big part of that's forward facing. A big part of that's I spent a lot of time fishing for shallow smallmouth back home more than I ever have.
Sure.
So I've learned kind of on both spectrums, shallow, offshore. And so next year we'll see. I don't know, like you said, you kind of simplify a little bit what you have most confidence in. But you always got to be willing to try the next thing too, because you never know when the next chatterbait or Senko or Ned rig's coming along, because it's coming.
For that.
It's coming.
I love it. I love figuring out that little like key to the lake, or like,
Yeah.
you know, and always looking for that. But I'm not sure where we're at for time, but like,
Are we really?
we're good.
All right.
Bob Downey. This has been one of the more fun ones I've ever done, dude.
Yeah,
and
I
I'm out of
appreciate
beer,
it.
but I'll cheers this water to you.
Yeah.
And like, I'm excited that you came out here. I'm grateful you came out here. And I guess to me, you're a guy who lets his rod do the talking. So it's really exciting to share kind of your story and dig a little deeper into
Yeah.
who you are and what you've accomplished. And congrats on another classic qualification, and like the whole state of Minnesota, and I suppose even Wisconsin.
Yeah, dude, I
And more is gonna
appreciate
be
it.
rooting for you, buddy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate you having me out, and what you're doing is really cool here, man. Like, I really appreciate it. It's to kind of show the Minnesota bass fishing and bass tournament culture is really neat. I think it's cool that you're documenting it, and yeah, I listen to all of them, man. It keeps me busy on the road, so keep it up. I appreciate you having me here.
I'm going to start blushing, dude. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Bob Downey checking in, checking out.